Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and welcome to the next episode of the Hard Compound Live. If it's your first time tuning in, welcome. And if you are back for more, then thank you very much for returning. For those of you who don't know, my name is Rich and I run and operate the Hard Compound. We're a one-stop shop for all things motorsport: four wheels, two wheels, single-seater, sports car, rallying, British Superbikes, World Superbikes, MotoGP, rallying, IndyCar, NASCAR. We try and cover it the very best we can all at once. On our Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube channels, search for the Hard Compound on any of those and you will find us. We cover motorsport in a number of ways, whether it be race reviews, race previews, any breaking news across the various series, car and bike livery unveils, driver announcements, throwbacks, birthdays, and all that kind of thing. Excuse me. In case you haven't noticed, we also do these live video interviews, which are automatically recorded on our Facebook, Twitter, and our YouTube channel. We've had a number of fantastic guests across the last 2.5 years. We've been doing these from all across the motorsport spectrum, really. These are automatically saved, as I've said, in the video section on our Facebook and in the live section on our YouTube. A number of guests, as I say, from the worlds of the world of touring cars, the world of F1 sports cars, IndyCar, the bikes world, and everything else as well that I've mentioned previously. The likes of Mr. Mario Andretti and Jackie Ickx. We had the absolute pleasure of speaking with them. We've also spoken recently with Mr. Mark Surer, with Petter Solberg. We've spoken with Mr. Derek Warwick, Stefan Johansson, Mark Blundell, David Brabham. We've spoken with Carl Wendling, Ari Leindijk, Nicholas Prost, Roberto Guerrero, Raul Boisel, Eddie Cheever, Emanuele Pirro. We've spoken with Dick Bennett, Jason Plato, Anthony Reid, Steve Soper, John Cleland, Fabrizio Giovinardi, Andy Prio, Rickard Rydell, etc., etc., etc. You get the idea. They're all saved on our Facebook and on our YouTube. So do go and check those out, but don't do it just yet, because we have another fantastic guest this evening. Someone that I remember watching when I was young and first getting into motorsport. He was winning races, and he's a guy that I've been wanting to speak to for a long time. So without any further ado, please join me in extending a very warm welcome to a man who's raced in Formula One, in the World Sports Car Championship at Le Mans in Japan. He's raced in IndyCar, anything you can shake a stick at, really, and the F1 feeder series as well. So without any further ado, please join me in extending a very warm welcome to Mr. Kenny Acheson.
Evening.
Evening, Kenny. How are you?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for asking me on.
No, thank you very much for coming on. And can I say, that is one heck of a background that you've got there.
Yeah.
One of the best that we've had.
Well, it's a long time since I did an interview or a live interview, so I thought I'll do it from my workshop. So I have my Formula 3 car here, my Formula 4 car, and obviously Sauber Mercedes. So very fortunate.
Wow.
Yeah. Both bands, emotional attachments.
No, I'm sure. And that's almost like the cross section in a way of your of your career. And as I said off air, that silver Mercedes behind you is the one that I remember standing at Clearways with you hammering past me when I was 8. Sorry, I was very young at the time, but that's the one that I remember. And it's fantastic to see it being rebuilt there.
Yeah, no, it's a lovely car. I took it to Goodwood a couple of years ago. And then I was at Silverstone last year, but the water pump broke, so had to take the engine out and just go back in. But it's not a big deal. They're mainly there to be looked at. They're not really, I mean, it's nice to take them out, but I certainly don't drive them very fast.
No, sure.
Well, never did really, you know.
Yeah, maybe just for a little trundle now and again.
Yeah.
Just in, like, Charlie Thompson has just put a comment here saying, "Oh, you're just showing off with this Sauber Merc," and why not? Why wouldn't you?
Possibly.
Yeah, fantastic. Right, just very quickly, I just want to turn attention to the comment section. We've had a few few comments already. Just to say hi to who have we got? John Cavill, Oliver Taylor, Rob Keefe, Simon Steele, John Cavill, Ben Perry, Charlie Thompson, and the rest. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you have any questions, do put them in there. We can see them in real time, and we'll try to work them in. We've got a couple of questions coming in already, which we will come to. But yeah, before we get into it, obviously there's quite a lot to get through. You've had a heck of a career. But where did it all start for you? Obviously, yeah, there was a family link, wasn't there?
Yeah, I mean, my family. I can never remember not being interested in motorsport initially with motorbikes, which obviously back home in Ireland is much bigger than cars. I mean, rallying's bigger than car racing as well. So my earliest memories were going to motorbike races, whether it was the Tandragee or my local racing Cookstown. Ulster Grand Prix, the first one I went to was 1964. Early heroes were like Ralph Bryans, who won the 50cc World Championship for Honda from Northern Ireland. Dick Creeth, who was second in 1964 in the 500 Grand Prix on a Ryan Norton, and I think he won in 65. Best memory is probably watching Mike Heelwood in 67 on the 504 against Agostini. And the last corner out of Dundroyd, because my father knew people, I actually watched the race from where the flag dropped. They brought the starters guy back, and so I stood there with my brother and sister.
Wow.
And I remember watching Heelwood come around, and he was absolutely where the road and the bank touched, and he was flat in the tank. And obviously, I mean, unbeknownst to him, his Agostini had retired in the first lap because he had a broken chain, and Heelwood was absolutely flat out. And as soon as he saw the pits, he just cruised for the rest of it. But honestly, he was my absolute hero. And I had the pleasure to meet him just a couple of months before he was killed, actually, at Donington Park. He used to have a Christmas party, and Mike was there, and I got introduced. But obviously, that was 81, 82, but I would have been way too embarrassed to have a long conversation with him. I wasn't from the 5,000, but he was just unbelievable on a bike, on a car. And obviously, I'm friendly with Ian Phillips, Chris Whitty, who covered motorsport when Mike was racing, and they said he is probably the nicest guy ever in motor racing. So yeah, big loss, but that memory still, I have that all the time.
That's a lovely memory to have. I mean, yeah, there's not many people that would have, really.
Yeah, I'm not old.
Seen him at full chat.
In those days, it was always in black and white. There was no color or anything like that. So, but that's in the 60s. So obviously that's where my love of motorsport came. My father then went with a friend to buy a Formula Ford at Mondello Park, and next morning woke up, my dad had bought one from the other guy's brother. So my father started racing Formula Ford when he was 40.
Wow.
So that's how I suppose I transitioned into cars, because I knew I would never be allowed to race bikes. My parents knew too many people who unfortunately lost their lives doing what they love, but you don't want to have that either. So my father raced Formula Ford. I was never a great mechanic, but it was more interesting than doing schoolwork. So I used to help prepare the car and clean it and do things like that. One day when I was like 17 or 18, he said, "Do you want to have a go?" And so I put the jeans inside my socks and borrowed my dad's hat, no overalls, and went to Kyrgyzstan, jumped in, and I suppose I did half an hour or something, and I got within a couple of seconds of the lap record. And I thought, well,
wow.
So, I mean, I didn't do karting. I mean, I grew up and learned on driving tractors and trailers, things like that. So, yeah, it was good. But yeah, without my father being interested, then obviously, and giving me the chance, and I suppose he saw there was a bit of talent there. But Formula Ford was really good then, because
it was a top proving ground, wasn't it?
And even when I came to England, we used to go to Castle Coombe or Brands Hatch or Croft, and you had all these special guys who were like not aiming to beat a Formula One, but they were hard to beat. And you'd have 60, 70 people maybe at some meetings where you'd have 3 heats, final. And although there's probably 15 or 20 of us were ambitious to want to go to Formula One or whatever, you still had that real core quality throughout. It's like my father would have raced against Daly, Devaney, Kennedy, and to be honest with you, we've beaten them all as well in Ireland. It's like Senna when he came the Formula 2000 against Joey Greener. Sure, he really struggled to beat him because the guy was a specialist where he was, and that was just such a really good time to be in junior motorsport. There was a lot of really good young drivers, but also there was an awful lot of very good experienced drivers who give you a hard time and were very helpful as well.
Yeah, which is nice. You know, you've got that kind of community around the series. I mean, just go back. I mean, you got within a couple of seconds of the lap record the first time you went. Yeah, your first session. I mean, and then you said that your dad spotted there was a bit of talent there. Absolutely. I mean, if you can get with, if you can start talking around like lap records and stuff, your first time.
Yeah, I mean, there's nobody else on the track, so it's not as if you're watching out, and there's Kirkstone was really only 3 corners anyway, so I mean, they're obviously, I suppose to be a professional driver, you have to have a reasonable amount of talent and enthusiasm, and believe me, I would have studied autosport and motoring news so much that I would have known what to do. I couldn't heel and toe. I didn't learn to heel and toe until about halfway through 1978. Before that, I used to just ram it down the box. My father never heeled and toed, so it was all a bit crude, but I didn't slow me down.
Get in there and punch it in. So, I mean, excuse me. It was what I've got here. Was it 76? You that you did. You tested your father's car, and
76 is when I started. I tested in 75. I drove it.
Okay.
76 then he was still racing, but by then there was always 2 heats. Mondello and Kyrgyzstan had a race for people who were just starting. So I was able to do that, and then at Mondello it was like, well, whoever got a better result in the heats did the final. And funnily enough, I think my father had a couple of heats, so early on I ended up being the final, and then towards the end, I suppose I was doing okay. And I actually went to Ingleson at the end of the year. Never seen it, and I put it in the front row alongside Stuart Lawson. And Ingleson was a lovely track, but the mistake I didn't know that in Scotland, I mean, Cameron Binney and all that was there. I mean, he was such a nice guy, and I got to know him the next year or so. And he said everybody thought, well, you have to have a bent engine to go there. But the problem I had is in the start, everybody in Scotland goes when they start or raise the flag. And of course, I didn't go till it dropped. I think
right.
Like the first corner, which was like 50 yards away, I was like 10th. So, but it was a lovely circuit.
Smashing. And, excuse me. Was it 77? You were entered into the Northern Ireland Championship. We'll come to what happened shortly. But did you have any expectations going into it? I mean, obviously you knew you were sort of pretty good, but did you think I can win a couple of races or score some points or just get to the finish? Or
I thought it was pretty good, but I didn't think I would really win there. But Trevor Templeton, who was really the top guy there, really, really nice guy. And in fact, he dropped in and saw me last year. I hadn't seen him for years, but always such a nice guy. And his father, Malcolm, was wonderful as well. But Trevor, he was very successful, and so he was going to go to England and do some races. So my father, he said, well, we'll go do some races with Trevor. And Trevor would take his transporter and out of the Volkswagen van. So I really wouldn't have expected to beat Trevor. There was Joey Greenan. There were Michael Phillips, who was really good. And I suppose I won one race because a couple of them collided, and then I won another race where I probably deserved it, and I got a second or two. So it was okay. I wouldn't say I was outstanding over there, but I think the difference was when I came to England. I was probably really competitive. Like I could, like Open Park, never saw the circuit, qualified 7th or 8th in 15 minutes, things like that. So
Wow.
that is kind of what I suppose brought me to the attention of, I mean, I went to Snetterton and Silverstone were my first 2 races over Easter, funny enough. And I remember David Minister at Snetterton said to my father, "Your boy is really talented." He says, "I'll look after him." So he always, made sure when we sent the engines back, he looked after us and that there. And then I suppose I got to know Trevor Van Rooyen. Rory Byrne was designing the Royales. So Rory actually asked me to go to. I had offers. Mike Blanchet Lola wanted me to drive. John Crossley offered me a car, but obviously being in Northern Ireland, it really wasn't going to be a step forward for me. So Rory asked me to test the Brands Hatch, so I went to test, and I had tickets for Northern Ireland, Holland. George Best and Johan Cruyff both playing.
Oh.
And I had to give them up.
Oh no!
Yeah, because it was a Wednesday, the test, so I couldn't.
Oh, they could have waited a day, couldn't
they?
they?
Well, I suppose I kind of, in hindsight, think maybe I should have waited or something like that. But anyway, I went, did the test. Rory signed me for 78, and David Minister gave me engines. So I thought, great, I'll go to England for a year. I didn't really have any expectations other than, I suppose, it's great to go. I mean, because Formula 4 to me was like the equivalent of Formula 1 growing up. Well, I mean, Formula 3 to me is what I suppose I really looked at and thought that's proper racing. So I went and obviously had a really good season. So yeah, it was good. Rory, he actually left just before the season started. He went to tournament. And Pat Simmons joined.
Okay.
So really it was Pat's, he had been at Hawk, but then he came and he did a really good job as well.
Wow.
Some nice people. And the guy, you were supposed to look after your own car, and I think Alan Cornick and Rory very, very quickly realised that I wasn't a natural mechanic. So, so fortunately, Paul Thompson, who was absolutely brilliant, was my mechanic all the way through Formula 4, Formula 3. He even did a couple of races Formula 2 for me and things like that. Went on to work for Richard Lloyd, Eddie Jordan. I think he worked with Gary in the R&D department at Jordan, Force India, and things like that. And actually met up with him a couple of years ago. But he was absolutely brilliant mechanic, brilliant, could make anything. So we had a really good relationship. So again, fortunate that you had good people to look after.
And it sort of sounds like that you did have some great people. I mean, just some of the names you mentioned there, they're very well known in motorsport for being very, very good at what they do. Which
I didn't destroy their careers.
No, no, they kept going upwards. It was fine.
Really good.
I mean, just going back. I mean, when you moved to the UK, I mean, did it feel like it was kind of necessary? I mean, obviously your abilities had been spotted, but you're only going to get so far in Ireland. With all due respect to the Irish racing scene, the UK was the place to be, especially where F3 was at the time and things like that. So,
I mean, the Irish were coming because David Kennedy, Derek Daly, Bernard Devaney come. Michael Rowe was the year before me, but then Michael and I ended up having a real tussle in '78. I mean, I won 3 championships, but Michael was like 4 or 5 points behind me, 2 of them. So it could quite easily have been he could have won 2 and I could have won 1.
Yeah.
And he was really good in Formula 4, things like that too. Yeah. So it was competitive. I mean, there were a lot of good drivers. James Weaver, Jonathan Palmer was there early on. So yeah, it was good. John Village, who, honestly, he was a rogue on the track. He used to just run you off the track and then come afterwards and say that was great fun, wasn't it? And you have to think, I didn't really think it was that much fun.
It was fun for you, yeah.
But, really, really good people. Cameron Binney, who, funnily enough, years later, I was at a European match with Newcastle, where we're in Europe under the Keegan Dalglish era.
Oh yeah.
And I was in the director's box and standing there at half time, and Cameron was just sitting in front of me. So yeah, it's good man, really good man.
Fantastic. Just going to take a quick sidestep here. If there's any football fans watching, you're going to like the next couple of minutes because, I mean, me and Kenny, we've been sending a couple of messages in the last couple of days. Both our teams are doing really well, and this doesn't happen, does it? Obviously, Kenny, you're a Newcastle man. I'm an Arsenal man for my sins. It's all going rather well this year, isn't it? I still don't think we're going to win the league, but it's been enjoyable, isn't it?
I mean, football is a really great sport. I've always been a big fan of football. Before I came to England, I was I was actually a Manchester City fan, and then I came to England, and I kind of lost the love of football. And I didn't even really watch a match of the day. I'm like, I guess we're racing. And then in '83, my wife's family are from Newcastle, and her aunt worked at St James's Park, I think for the sponsors and things like that. So she took me to, I was there for a wedding, but instead of going to the wedding, she said, well, why don't you go to the football? So I went to the football, and it was Crystal Palace against Newcastle in the second division. And you had Keegan, Waddle and Beardsley all playing. But honestly, the reason I'm a Newcastle fan is that day, it was just blew my mind that a town could be taken over by a football team. The fans were magnificent, and it continues today. And I think even Sunday's match, against Manchester United, like even Gary Neville says, can't remember an atmosphere like that. But they're good people, and I mean, I haven't been to Newcastle for years now because obviously Fiona's family, or unfortunately grandparents, all passed away and that. But it's the place that I find closest to being in Northern Ireland, wherever you just walk in and people would talk to you. You wouldn't know what they're saying, but they would talk to you. Good.
Yeah, that's the thing. There's people talking up there, but you think, I mean, I've only been up there once. I actually went up there. It was when you guys were relegated to the Championship in '09. We were there for the game against Doncaster Rovers. We made a weekend of it, and Nolan and Carroll got the goals late. It was a late winner.
Yeah.
And the place went ballistic, and the atmosphere in the town was incredible because, as you say, the whole town is geared around the football club, and it's fantastic.
I mean, the last race I did was for Newcastle United with Lawrence Pearson, Lister Store.
Yes.
Obviously, I got to know Douglas Hall and Freddie Shepherd and that, at Daytona. And in fact, even the year after, they said, I wasn't racing, but they rang Lawrence up and said, well, can you get me to come? Because at least they can talk football to that, So, no, it was, they absolutely, loved the town and everything like that. And I remember having a conversation with John Hall about where, and he said the difference when he took over the club and, the success they were having, he said the difference to the local economy is just, it's huge. And I think, again, I mean, I'm sure not everybody would choose the current owners as they are, but I think the area certainly needs investment and growth will get that. And I don't think that's to be sniffed at. I think it's a wonderful area full of wonderful people, as football fans show.
Yeah.
So I hope that the area benefits by the success of the football club. I have no doubt it will. Because also, like once you buy a shirt, then from a local stockist, for then the money, they employ people. It just, the economy goes round.
Snowballs.
If they can do that in the northeast, I think that would be really good, really good.
Absolutely, and I'd like to see Newcastle do well, but just not when they play Arsenal in a few weeks. You can have a day off and then.
You weren't happy with our 0-0 draw, were you, earlier at Highbury?
I was a bit annoyed because it was just one of those games where Newcastle defended very, very well, and I think it was probably a fair result. I mean, people can say about, we should have had a penalty and blah blah, but when the ball went in the box, that wasn't a free kick, so whatever. You can look at it to the nth degree, but it's just nice to see Newcastle back up at the top.
For the fans, they really are fantastic. For a club that has never won a trophy in my lifetime in the UK, they won the 1969 Fairs Cup, size 12. I mean, and still you have that support, and they sell out just all the time. It's fantastic, absolutely fantastic. And they're playing great football, good culture, so excellent.
Just feels like it's all coming together, which is great. Right, sorry, digression there. Sorry, folks. We're going to swing back to motorsport. I mean, that year, 78, I've got here that you won 29 races across the various different championships. That's mighty impressive. And you picked up an award. Was it the Goldwood Award? That was like a financial.
Yeah, Grovewood Award.
Was it?
Yeah, $1,000. I think the Mansell was maybe second.
Was he?
Yeah.
Never heard of him. And was that just did?
I mean, I suppose that's the equivalent of the Autosport or the Autosport Award now. But then it was Grovewood Award, so it was £1,000. It was, quite a big thing. Money wasn't huge, but it was all welcome. And it was prestigious, so we always had that on your CV. But I don't think many people who won it ended up really successful. So but at the time it was a nice to have, and it was as I say, it was a really nice year. I did 58 races. I won 29. But I think by the end of August, my success rate was far higher. But I just got it was a long season, and I did get a little bit bored. And then we had the last 4 or 5 races, including the Formula Ford Festival. I was asked to use the next year's car because I'd won the championships, and the rear suspension and it was flexing. So, I think the best I finished was second or third. I never actually won in the car. So that kind of put my hit rate. But to be honest with you, I was just happy the season was over because, winning isn't everything, and I can say that because I didn't win a great deal. But it's the scrap. It's how you perform. It's the competition, and there were Formula Ford races that I was winning, and whether it was because the car and the engine I had were just very well suited, and I suppose I had a really professional team. So it wasn't always boring, but there were races that you were thinking, I was not really gonna thinking great.
Without this.
Later on, I would have taken any old win, mind you. But at the time, you can't. This is always going to happen. So.
Yeah, sure. I mean, and I guess in that the success that you had that year, even if it did get a bit, what's the word, like monotonous, I suppose. That obviously helped you go into F3 in 79. Was that? I always wonder this. Was this the first time you were in like a full kind of wing car?
Yeah. I mean, I tested Formula 3 March a couple of times that year, and actually I have a friend over in Ireland who had a Formula Atlantic car, Michael Nugent, and he let me, before I came to England in 78, he let me drive his Formula Atlantic Modus at Mondello Park, but took the nose off it, which wasn't very successful. So, it was a big step, and also I took my guys from Formula Ford, so they'd never ran cars with wings. And early on the season was a bit hit and miss because I had my own team. Because we didn't have, in those days, if you didn't have a budget, you just have your own team. Early on it was difficult. We had a Rolt, but Jerry Warwick's old Rolt, and then the Marches were winning everything. So my father, this is the actual car. My father, he went and bought me the car. I had a really good sponsor in RMC who came on board in Formula Ford and backed me for 2 years, Formula 3, and were always there during my career. So they were great, but so my father bought me that Formula 3 March. Well, first race was Donington Park, European Championship. Prost, everybody qualified in the front row with Alain Prost.
Wow.
And it was raining a bit going to the grid, and I put it in the barriers on Wakeler in the Wakeler grid. So I didn't start the race. The following weekend was Monaco. I'd already had a broken wrist from Formula Ford anyways, but I tweaked it again. So didn't qualify at Monaco. I came out of the pits during practice, and Brett Riley, who was doing really well at the time for Dave Price, and didn't see him in my mirror, and absolutely destroyed him at Saint-Devote.
Oh no!
The following year, the exact same happened to me, but not with Brett. Somebody else came out and had the exact same accident. So, yeah.
You weren't too angry with him because you knew how it felt to be.
Well, I was lucky because we actually had. I was in this car, and then for the following day we ran the 803, which was okay. But then they had the rockers on it, and so the works teams had told had reinforced theirs because you hit the curb and it would bend. So I went out and did a couple of 3 laps, and then started to grind. So came in, and the rockers are bent. And I remember, Murray Taylor and Paul Thompson said, well, I can wind that front ride height up and we reset it. So just with bent rockers, he says, you might get 2 laps. So I went out, did my lap, I think it was 3rd or 4th. But of course, as the session went on, I was sitting in the pits. And I started 18th or 19th.
Okay.
And I finished 4th. So yeah, I had a really good race. That was one of the best races.
That's a heck of an achievement.
The car
on that circuit as well.
The car was every corner of it. The nose was broken, every wheel was bent. It was good. And actually I had the fastest lap until Slim Borgert came in, bless him. He's just passed away.
Yeah.
And then he came in, put on new tires and did the fastest lap. And I had the fastest lap up to that, so I was so pissed off. But there you go. I was still, again, that was a really good race, but I was 4th, so
yeah.
But
just while we're on the subject of Monaco, at the moment it's getting a lot of stick. It's saying it shouldn't be on the F1 calendar. It's outdated. It's blah 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 blah. And I will say this till I'm red in the face. It's the cars. They're too big. The circuit's brilliant.
Yeah. I agree.
I've spoken to a number of people who have driven around Monaco, and they've all said it must stay.
I agree. I think it is just the diamond. And okay, every race is disappointing, but the cars are too big. They're too heavy. I mean, you go back even to when Lewis started in the end of the noughties. Those cars were just fantastic to look at. And they were light, they were nimble, they had grip, they sounded great. And the cars, I mean, are a spectacular piece of engineering.
Yeah.
And the way the teams work is on such a high level. But, maybe they're going up their own backsides a little bit too much. But I think politically, I can't see that they can go back to normal aspirated engines. I can understand why the cars have to be heavier because they do need the the roll hood,
the halo and everything.
Out there, which that's one of the really good things for this sport is that we were talking earlier about tragedies and things like that. And actually, all the time, this sport is the motor racing, car racing, is trying to move forward to make it safer, that there aren't long-term health issues for drivers, that they're not seriously injured. Of course, serious injuries can happen, deaths can happen, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But I do think the Max Mosley, when he was at the FIA, and Senna's unfortunate tragedy, I think that had a really big effect on the sport as a whole. And most of it's good because the safety are not there. But then I look at, how you start, and I don't understand the stairway to Formula One. I think the cars are too expensive to run. You can't, there's no way my father could go and race at 40. So you're not getting those grades. It seems to be limited that that drivers, unless they are from extremely wealthy,
That's the key, isn't it?
I'm not sure that they can get there. And again, there's so much fantastic British talent around us, like Dan Harper from Northern Ireland. He's, won the Porsche Cup.
Porsche,
He's now at BMW. You have Harry King doing amazing things in Porsche.
Yeah, I mean, I spoke with Harry last year, and I've been in touch with him. He's from just down the road. Terrific talent.
I met him at Goodwood a couple of years ago. Really nice kid. Honestly,
impressive.
Fantastic driver. But to be honest with you, he should be trying to do Formula 2, because if he was able to go that route, or if you had the stepping stones that I was fortunate to have in back in my day, then you have options. And then I suppose when you don't get there, you go to something else. Because he obviously is super talented, or he's not the only one. But that's a little bit difficult. I can totally understand. If I was a driver now, I'd be wanting to go down GT route, because that is ultimately where you're going to earn money and you're going to get some sort of glory. Going Formula 3, Formula 2, one make car, one make engine, one make tires. No Easter Monday Thruxton Formula 2, which was a fantastic event. And then you go to Monaco, and you look at the Formula 1 cars, and you think, well, it's so skillful to go around to drive a car like that. Even whenever they're saving tires, they're still unbelievably talented.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure that, I would say, if you ask the likes of a Lewis Hamilton or a Fernando Alonso, right, which area of car would you recommend for every, to start a game? And Adrian Newey, I'm sure they would probably all go, you know what, maybe the 2000s or 1990s would be right.
Yeah.
They look spectacular, whereas now these cars just look unbelievably fast. Yeah,
and they just look a bit. The cars just look a bit cumbersome around Monaco, and that's down to, as you said, it's down to the cars. And not
it is a spectacle, but the race isn't a spectacle, because you think can't pass. You could drive around 3-4 seconds slower, and I don't think anybody will overtake it.
No, I mean it's so difficult, and obviously people want to see overtakes, but then again. It's becoming more about the show, but then from the driver's skill point of view, Monaco is still the ultimate test, isn't it? But it's
people will work out if the show is shit or not.
Yeah.
At the minute, I would have to say it isn't exactly doing itself a lot of favors. Red Bull are so much ahead of everybody else. And in fact, I was just reading Alain Prost in the Keep today, said about, McLaren, supposedly a big team. What are they doing? Supposed to be a big team. What are they doing? Mercedes, everybody's saying, well, Mercedes don't become a bad team overnight. They don't. But actually, you go back 2 years ago and you knew they were struggling. So why didn't you do something about it then? It's not easy whenever you're winning all the time, because you do come complacent and you do think better. But, they've reacted well. But they should have reacted this time last year. Absolutely. If I was Russell and Hamilton, they must be spitting feathers.
Yeah.
You have to go around there and be 3/4 of a second slower than a Red Bull.
Soul destroying, isn't it? But I think Lewis came out and said, "I told you."
Yeah, exactly. The thing is, I look at Red Bull and I wouldn't say I always like the way they say things, but so much respect to Christian Horner and Adrian Newey and everybody at Red Bull, because actually they're running a racing team the way, a Frank Williams, Patrick Head, a Ron Dennis. It is racing. It isn't. Everything is whatever we have to do, we'll do to win.
Yeah.
And everybody, too much of the rest it's I don't know. And as I say, I think Mercedes, I can understand last year to a degree maybe being off the ball, but this year is,
they kind of should have clawed it back.
They're no better. And Ferrari, and these are big teams. You have all these big teams, and they are so far behind Red Bull. And I know Adrian Newey is incredibly talented and genius, probably the greatest designer ever. Well, I'd say definitely the greatest designer ever. But ultimately, why aren't there other people closer to them? And, you know, as I say, there's things about Red Bull I don't like, but they must have a really great culture as a business, the Formula One team, the culture. And as I say, it doesn't always come across that, you know, because they do say some crap at times, but,
Yeah.
but you know, the culture is there. And, you know, everybody else seems to be politically correct instead of getting on and racing, but obviously they're a lot more successful at it than ever I was. So I'm only as somebody who sits in front of the TV and watches it like everybody else.
Yeah. No, but I do think you have more right to talk about it than the vast majority of the fans who have never even.
I'm never afraid to give an opinion, but unfortunately, I realize my opinion is quite often wrong.
That's why we love opinions. But no, but we've got to say well done to Red Bull for what they've put together. It's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, and then, you know, and the culture in that team is really successful. Not maybe perfect, but it's incredibly good. It's a lot years ahead of everybody else at the minute.
Yeah, absolutely, and it doesn't always come across the right way, but yeah, absolutely right. Right, back to the good old days, the proper days. Just want to nudge in back to F3. I mean, you'd obviously had a very decent first year, linked up with like Murray Taylor Racing, 1980. Now this was the year I've done my research here, and I've spoken to a couple of guys on here that you raced against closely. Two chaps that you were fighting against. I spoke with Roberto Guerrero back in February. The loveliest man. And the same can be said for Stefan Johansson, who came on, I think, 18 months ago. And whenever I mentioned that season, their kind of faces lit up because they just enjoyed it so much. Was that the same for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I love 79 and 80 both. And we did the 2 seasons together. 79, you had Chico Serra, Thackwell, Andrea De Cesaris. I mean, Nigel did both years. Nigel finished after Monaco. But it was just really good. And there was competitiveness, but there was like a friendly rivalry too. I mean, Stefan and I think in 79 did end up running into each other a little bit. And I remember there was a televised race in November. And we had a really good race. In the last lap, we banged wheels and Stefan spun off and I won. And I remember he came up to me afterwards and I'm thinking, oh God, he's going
to stick one on me here.
He says, Stefan would effing, that was fucking fun and all, and just really good. And you know, I actually met up with Stefan a couple of times. I was in Los Angeles last year, so had dinner and went to his art gallery. And
that's an amazing art gallery.
He is an amazing artist, and you know, things like that there. So he's always really good guy. I haven't met Roberto since America in the mid 1980s, but they're both really, really nice guys. And again, Stefan won the championship. I think we were tied for second, 2 points behind. It's a bit like the year before, or a couple of years before with Formula Ford. You know, Michael Rowe could have won the championship and I could have been second. It would have obviously been nice to win the championship for me because I led more or less all the year. It was just the last race that I kind of didn't work out for me. But, you know, Stefan again had a lot of bad luck early on and then got the Ralt and, you know. And just whenever you thought you had momentum, something would happen. And it happened to all three of us because Stefan started off well and then dropped off and then I had a run and then dropped off and then Roberto, you know, so it was a really good season and there was, you know, we really, you know, we were, you know, good friends and things. I mean, again, you say good friends, but when you went to a race and you went home, you were miles from anybody, so you didn't socialize with each other.
Sure. And
you didn't have phones or, you know, Instagram or WhatsApp or things like that to be able to communicate. But all the success that they've had, I'm really pleased, and I think they're, you know, as I say, I haven't seen Roberto from the 1980s. So farewell, see him soon. But just really good people, both of them. And Stefan has not changed a bit. Just really, really good guy. And actually, it's probably too nice. That's why he probably didn't win a Grand Prix.
He actually said the same thing himself. He said, "Oh, I was always nice to everyone, but I should have been a bit more nasty when I was at McLaren. But when I was,
Yeah,
with Alan Prost,
yeah,
you kind of scuttle back into your shell a bit." But
no.
um,
That's
but
not his character. It's not his character.
no, no. I mean, when I mentioned to Mr. Guerrero, I mentioned a couple of weeks ago because he very kindly signed a photo and sent it back to me, and I said, "Oh, by the way, I've got Kenny Acheson coming on," and he said in capital letters on the email, it just said Kenny in big letters. He goes, "Oh, do pass on my best wishes." So,
I will do. Yeah, pass him back. You see, good man.
yeah, message from Roberto. I can try and put you in touch. That'd be cool. Yeah, and obviously the last race you mentioned it didn't quite sort of work out, and you just you ended up finishing tied for second. I don't really want to ask what happened because it might be painful, but I mean, what? Because obviously you guys were right in the hunt for the title in that year.
I think all I had to do was finish third, and I qualified. I think I qualified second, but I qualified. It had rained in the morning, so I was actually on a wet spot in the grid.
Right.
So I didn't get off the grid well, and Roberto got off the grid well, and he actually was leading Stefan, and Rob Wilson overtook me, and he had a road, and I was a lot faster, and I was in this car, and the year before I'd overtaken Brett Riley in the race round the outside of the chicane, going into the chicane, and so knowing that Roberto was winning, which would have meant I needed to finish third, I think, if he won or something like that, or second, I can't remember. I suppose I kind of thought I can do it, and actually I would have done it, but Rob decided not to turn in. So there you are. And you could say, well, he's racing, but if somebody's going for a championship, you just think, just involved. So, but yeah, my bad. So there you are. But he could have probably been a little bit kinder, but
a little bit more gentlemanly.
yeah, well, there you go. Maybe not.
Or not, yeah, but it was what it was. I mean,
it was what it was, and at the time, yeah, maybe it would have made a bit of difference to my career, but ultimately, it probably would have made a huge difference. Yeah. So it doesn't matter, I mean, I was really pleased Stefan won it anyway, and Roberto would have been equally as merited winning it.
Yeah, smashing. And you ended up moving up into F2 the following year. Anyway, I mean, this was the step up from F3 to F2 like a big jump, because obviously in my mind I've only seen bits of it in hindsight, and it
was, and really, it was all a very last minute deal. I ended up going to drive for Alan Docking, really, really good guy. Stefan had a very last minute deal there too, so we were teammates. And I think we had like about half a day's testing before the first race.
Really?
And then it rained, and you didn't really know what you were doing. And I really didn't have much money. I had very little money, so it was like, okay, I knew I could do about 5-6 races. So that wasn't good, and then I went to Hockenheim next time, and Stefan won there. I think I qualified 6th. I think he qualified 8th or 9th, and then I got a puncture in the first lap on the run down the first chicane. So that didn't count, and then how I know this is actually during COVID. Chris Whitty was doing lots of stuff about towing and Formula 2, and so Chris lives just up the road, so he was asking me, about which cars I drove. So I went and got out all these old scrapbooks that RMC used to keep for me. And I was thinking, God, I was so bad in Formula 2. And actually, then I looked, I was actually, I wasn't quite as bad as I thought, because I think I went to Nürburgring, I qualified again. I qualified 6th at Hockenheim. I think Nürburgring, I qualified 4th or 5th, never seen the place, finished 6th.
Yeah, 6th. And
Thruxton,
was that on the full?
yeah, Thruxton, I qualified fourth and was running, I think, third or something, and then the engine broke. Went to the 2 races in Italy, crashed at Vallelunga, and the car was really slow. Went to Mugello. I was embarrassingly bad. Like, people who were, I was behind them. I was so bad. And,
Wow.
So I remember Poe was the next race, I think.
Yeah.
And I went to Alan Dark and I said, listen, I've got 1 race left. So we looked at all the things, all the, the wings and that weren't sealed below, so we went and put new side posts, put, really a lot of stuff on the car. And I went to Poe and Alan, he'd ran, I think, Hood Gather and Siegfried's store the year before, and he says, we'll set it up really hard around the front so it's responsive. And the car was absolutely a gem to drive.
On rails almost.
Well, I was just miles quicker than anybody. I mean, I qualified second, and I was doing long runs, and I broke down, and I was like miles quicker. And then Alboreto with qualifiers just pipped me, and I think on the Sunday morning again, I was like probably a big part of a second quicker than anybody. And it wasn't, it was just the car was that good, and then obviously. I talked to Kelly on the grid, and he said, listen, because he hadn't had a great season either. And he said, let's just be careful. The first one I said, yeah, absolutely. And then, so it was okay. But we pulled away quite a bit, like 2-3 seconds ahead of Jeff Lees. And McKelly went wide at the first corner. I went up the inside. Fair enough. I had the momentum to go up the hill. And he just came over, put me on the actual pavement.
Oh,
So
right.
I was thinking, well, how do I get out? Because our wheels are interlocked. So
Sure.
if I braked, he would have went over me. I kept thinking, he's bound to give me time to move. And actually, I remember my nose was down. So I was thinking, actually, I can probably still pit and win. Because the car was that good.
That good.
But he didn't move. So obviously, when we braked, I went over. And I remember have you ever been to Poe?
I haven't, no. It's on my list.
The wall isn't very high, but the drop behind the wall is a long way down.
It's a steep hill up to the left-hander, isn't it? Under the bridge.
Yes, and there's a tight left. But the wall on the other side is probably, I don't know, 20, 30-meter drop. And I remember thinking, if I go over that. And then I didn't, and I remember looking at the wall is the speed. And I was like, okay. So it was a big crash, but broke my leg. I didn't know I'd broken my leg.
Okay.
I was on the circuit for probably about 20 minutes while they cut me out. Everybody just kept racing.
Yeah, I remember I saw actually in the research in this, I saw the footage of it, and they are just sort of flying past and stuff. 2 things. I mean, I don't know if you've seen the footage of it. One of the marshals is aiming a fire extinguisher up a tree. Was it on fire?
They were definitely a bit panicked because
it was
I landed and I was upside down.
Yeah, you were upside down against the barrier.
Nobody came because I suppose they thought. And then I waved my hand underneath. So then they turned it up, and then they kind of tried to get me out. And I absolutely had no pain. I didn't think I was injured even.
Really?
Yeah, and then they put a Land Rover and they tried to pull the front of the car so that I could ease my leg out. And I remember that it broke, so it came back and smashed my shin again. And then...
Because on the footage...
the fire extinguisher went off in my car.
Right.
And that, I actually had quite a big hole in the back of my calf because, it was the CO2, which freezes. So basically burnt the skin off my leg. It wasn't picked up until 2 weeks later when I came back to Nottingham.
Crikey. On the footage, you're kind of standing up in the car, looking at things and pointing on what to do. And it's amazing. I mean,
and they had the pneumatic pump to try and pump the car. And so they were doing this, and then I pointed to obviously I don't speak French. And I said, but you've put this on my leg. But, they finally towed the car around the corner and cut the thing out. And I remember then I looked and my leg just went to the right. And that's when I suppose you go into shock, which isn't very good. So, and I went to hospital, and the nurse, she gave me, or the doctor gave me the biggest telling off, and I'm thinking, I'm bloody dying here, and you're just telling me off in French and all this. And actually, the lady came to see me the next day, the doctor, and spoke perfect English, and she said, just so you know, the reason why I was so telling you off yesterday was because you were in severe shock. And she said, we were really worried that we could lose you. And if you're somebody's in shock, then you just have to really tell them off. So get the adrenaline. So she was really good, so it was fine. And, I got flown back then. Sponsor of mine, Patrick Hyatt, who used to help me. He knew fantastic orthopedic surgeon, that's the right word, isn't it? In Nottingham. Queen Elizabeth in Nottingham, and he used to do a lot of work with jockeys, and he fixed King Charles as he is now. He fixed his shoulder, and he did an amazing job fixing my leg, and I have no pains, no limp, nothing, and it was broken. It was pretty shattered in a lot of places, but yeah, it was good. It was okay. It's good. Wow. But I got some very good treatment and everything like that, and then obviously, later that year, I did Mantle Park, which again, Alan Docking arranged, which he didn't have to. He did a deal with Avon Tires because that was the first time they raced in Formula 2. And Alan, and I think Tim Clues and people like that, who TL Clues used to do all the insurance. I think they all put their hand in their pocket and took me to Mantle. Finished third, Stephen won. So yeah, it was kind of okay, but yeah.
It was a good comeback.
And looking back, so I say, my pace wasn't bad. It's just I didn't really get results.
Yeah. It just a shame that what happened at Poe happened, because it could have. Kick on a bit.
Yeah, there's downside. Or there's an upside to everything, because I ended up meeting my wife.
Yes, the silver lining. Yeah.
She was working. She never into motor racing. She was working as a translator at Donington, because her mother worked with a guy who ran the press office.
Okay.
So I ended up meeting her, and so it wasn't all bad.
Yeah, it all worked out on that side of things, which is great. Yeah. Just I want to touch on, we touched on this side of things earlier, the sort of sad side of motorsport, I guess. Your accident, obviously it was a bad one and you suffered a bad injury. Luckily, you're all okay. That year when that year in '82, obviously we lost like Gilles Villeneuve, and Didier Pironi had his accident, and Riccardo Paletti was lost, and Gordon Smiley at the Indy 500, one of the most horrendous accidents I've ever seen. Mm-hmm. When all that kind of comes in a fairly short amount of time, did you ever think?
No. The accident that probably affected me most was Thruxton in '81. Mike Thackle broke his legs. Mike and I were like we'd done from before, and he really, really nice guy. Obviously, Mike was always Mike and still continues to be. But he was fantastic, and I remember he broke his legs, and that was the one time I remember thinking, and I suppose it was the first serious injury to a friend. But he came back, and obviously Madonna was incredibly successful, won the Formula 2 championship and all that. So, but that was probably the thing. Obviously, '82, I didn't know Villeneuve Pironi. I was aware of it. I watched the documentary there a couple of weeks ago, and I thought it was a fantastic documentary.
It's brilliantly done.
Superb. Very tragic story. I know, I'm aware of some of the things that did happen, because I have been, friends with people who obviously knew the detail behind it. But it's very tragic. I suppose '85 and '86, with Manfred being killed in Porsche at Manfred Club in Mosport, and then I actually replaced him a week later in Austria in Formula 1. And then Stefan Bellof was killed a couple of weeks later in Spa. Jonathan, I think, broke his legs that weekend. Jonathan Palmer.
Yeah, I believe he
And
did.
then
Yeah.
the following year, obviously, Joe Gardner, who the first time I raced a Group C car, I co-drove with Joe for John Fitzpatrick.
Hmm.
So those three, and that's I don't really, everybody who's my close friends now, nobody knew me when I was racing.
Right.
So, and had really no interest in racing or that day. So obviously, I guess having a couple of cars and things like that, and, they do talk, and they, and they sort of said, and we're talking about racing. I said, yeah, but it was relatively safe when I was racing. But then I kind of count up the people who I knew who ended up being killed, and I really surprised myself. But I remember those three. Those were really, really tragic things that have happened. But again, it's funny now. You look at, we were talking earlier about young drivers going into Porsche and GP and things like that. I guess those cars, I've looked at them, they are really well built and relatively safe. Whereas even when I was doing Formula 2, Jonathan and Thierry Boutsen and Stefan would go off and race Porsches. And to be honest with you, I had no interest to sit in a bloody sports car because I just thought they're dangerous. It wasn't really until I went to Japan that I raced for John Fitzpatrick at Monza with Joe. And Joe was miles quicker than me. And then, but then I got used to it. And in fact, later on that year in '85, I drove for Richard Lloyd in Fuji. And Joe, and I qualified Joe. So I thought, okay, I've learned now, But he was a nice guy too. And I know a friend of mine, Stuart Dent, was very, very close friends with Joe. So yeah, those three because they're all nice people. I mean, Stefan, I didn't really know Stefan that much, but I think we had the same birth year within a day or two.
Yeah.
And but I always thought he was smiling. Manfred was really good. In '83, he drove the ATS when I was trying to do Formula 1 in the Ram. So we kind of shared a garage, and he was driving for Paul Owens, who had ran me at Morrow. And Manfred was always really, really good, really encouraging, joking. And to be honest with you, I mean, Stefan, I would have known, Raul, I would have known a little bit. But God, yeah, nobody, like Watty, who I did know, he was serious, so he wouldn't come to the back end of the grid to talk to me. So that, on the back end of the guys, I didn't even make the grid. Manfred was always good, and then. Earlier in '85, I actually did test the car for John McDonald. And I remember went to the Grand Prix and Manfred said, "Oh, you're my test driver," and all this. So he was just a really, really nice guy. And it was, I actually won that weekend. I won a Formula 2 race in Japan. And Eddie Jordan was my manager then. Upsides and downs. No, Eddie was.
Not Eddie, yeah.
No, basically going to Japan saved my career. Was the biggest moment in my life, was going to Japan. Other than meeting my wife, obviously. But I won then, and Eddie called me on the Monday, and John McDonald asked if I would go back, and I sort of said, well, okay. And he said, well. And John said to me, he says, in '83, he says, I really didn't rate you. He says, but then I know the performance we had in '84. And he says, what you did with the car in '83, absolutely, you did do a good job. And so it was nice of him to come back and ask me to do that, but they had no money. Really nice guys, things like that there. And actually, '83 car, people said, oh, it was a bad car. The car actually was reasonably well balanced.
Right.
We were on Pirelli tires. Nobody else was, all of them turbo cars. But I remember we were always like, my overall thoughts of me being a Formula One driver is mainly embarrassment, because it was, you look at the results, I'm probably one of the worst ever drivers in Formula One. No, seriously, you look at the results, how many I didn't qualify, distance I was away from people in qualifying. But actually in Monza, McLaren decided to use the tag Porsche engines, and Ron Dennis gave John McDonald one of his engines. And all of a sudden, I was able to overtake somebody in the straight. And, you know, instead of being 2 seconds slower than everybody, I think in Monza I missed out by, you know, 100th or, you know, a 10th or something. And Michele Alboreto in the Toro, who just signed for McLaren or for Ferrari, he was the one person in front of me. And then went to Brands Hatch. I was in the first day, I was 24th, and then the second day I ended up 27th. Jonathan Palmer actually was in third Williams, so he ended up kind of getting in, and but Lafitte was slower than me in a Williams. So the car, all of a sudden we had an engine that actually, I wouldn't say made us fully competitive, but it wasn't the absolute tosser that I'd probably seen for the previous 10 races. But as I say, you know, the team were good. The car, you know, was safe and everything like that. I guess, you know, I changed from Formula 2 to that, and, you know, I had a little bit of money, and it was the same amount of money if I'd finished the Formula 2 season in Formula 1. I'm sure everybody at John McDonald's Ram team were probably jumping up and down when I signed for them, but, you know, it was a chance. And I think in hindsight, I probably did okay, but I didn't really know, because you didn't get any data to say what your speeds were or anything.
Sure.
So it was just like you go out, you drive around, your lap time was your lap time. You weren't getting sectors, you weren't getting, you know, and, you know, if you're driving along the straight and you can't keep up with Mark Sewell in the narrows, or Thierry Boots in the narrows, or Corrado Fabian in a Osella, you know, you just think, well, that's how it is, you know.
There's only so much you can do, isn't there?
But that's it, you know, unless we're losing it around the corners or things like that. But I'm pretty sure the engines just made such a difference, which, you know, I mean, I was still near the end anyway, so it didn't really matter, as I said.
Yeah. It was still the improvement. I mean, just very quickly, because the opportunity initially came around, was it Eliseo Salazar? He had funding issues because what was going on in Chile, didn't he? And you sort of
well, I think he probably thought the car is not really worth driving, because
it was, yeah.
Alessio had done, you know, some pretty well in the N9 and the ATS. So I suppose he was thinking, well, you know, he had something to compare to. And I guess there weren't a lot of takers for that drive. I mean, Jacques Lafitte had driven it the week before in Canada. That's Jacques Villeneuve. Sorry, Jacques Villeneuve.
Yes.
And he was like me, miles off the pace, and he was a good driver. I mean, I met him in Indy cars in '84. Really nice guy, really quick driver. But, you know, most people who get to, I think everybody who gets to Formula One is a good driver, but obviously it's just about getting the right opportunity, being in the right place, and the right drivers do get those opportunities. The drivers that are kind of maybe not, probably like myself, get what you deserve. So I got a chance, which is more than a lot of people, but it's probably, at least I guess I can say I was a Formula One driver, but honestly, it's mainly one of embarrassment.
No, but you can say you know, I mean, not many people can say they've raced in a Grand Prix. I mean, you know, that's I certainly can't.
You said raced in a Grand Prix. I would say I drove in a Grand Prix, because I certainly wasn't racing anybody where I was. Quite a bit far back. I mean, 85, I qualified in Austria, but that track was fantastic. You had no tire warmers, you're running.
Yeah, when it was the proper first ring.
Just trying to go in a straight line with cold tires and no downforce. And it was not easy. But actually, that year in Holland on the Friday, because you used to Friday and Saturday, qualifying Friday, Saturday. And on the Friday morning, I was actually pretty quick. I think I was like 20th or something. I mean, I was decent. And then the engine broke in my car. The engine broke in Philippe's car, Alio. So we had to share a car for qualifying on the Friday. So he went first. And obviously, when I got in the car, there wasn't a whole lot of engine left. Well, that was by accident or whatever, but it was certainly
fairly done.
So I didn't qualify, and I did Monza. And I qualified. I think I did 3 laps in total, and that, you know, and I qualified. I had qualified Philippe, and actually I qualified Alan Jones as well. But the car was yeah, 3 laps. I mean, obviously everybody had issues, but yeah. And so after that, I rang John McDonald on the Monday, and I said, "There's no point me doing the rest of the season because I wasn't being paid. I was there for the first time in my life. I was being paid money to race in Japan.
Right.
Funnily enough, the World Sports Car race was coming up at Fuji, and I could drive at that and get paid. And it then actually ended up driving for Richard Lloyd with Johnny Dumfries at that race. So that was it. And I said to him, nobody can tell if I'm any good or not in this. So what's the point?
Yeah.
And I kind of,
if the machinery's not there, you can't do it. You know,
those 3 Grand Prix, I suppose, changed the way I viewed my career. Up to that, it was, even when I went to Japan, the idea was to do well enough to come back. So you were chasing the glory. And then I guess I realized the glory wasn't going to happen in Formula One. So it was about trying to, be professional and earn whatever money I could, because obviously I was never going to earn serious money. I had a nice lifestyle. I enjoyed my job. But obviously I knew, I mean, I never wanted to be an old racing driver. So I kind of always wanted to be finished by mid-30s and do something else with my life. So those 3 races, I suppose.
It's a turning point almost.
Yeah. So as I say, you stop chasing the ultimate glory and you decide, okay, this is my job, and if somebody pays me, I'll drive it.
Yeah, sure.
And I was lucky. I did drive a lot of nice cars, a lot of good people throughout my career, but after that, I was pretty fortunate too.
Yeah, absolutely. And just want to say one thing, that 85 car, was it the Skoll Bandit, the Ram? Wasn't the quickest car, as you well know, but
it was actually a nice car. It just, never ran long enough to be quick. And funnily enough, whenever I finished, Benetton had just announced that they were changing, or Tolman had changed to, or Benetton, I forget which it was. They were changed to BMW. So I think Brian Hart gave John McDonald inches, and I think Alio qualified like 15th, 16th of Brands Hatch. So the car was, Gustav Brunner had a really nice little car there. But when I drove it, I mean, in Austria, maybe I did a dozen laps, and
no, that was it.
It was, a Monza on the Friday morning. I didn't do 1 lap in one car. I ran back, got in the spare car, and it blew up going out the pit road.
Oh,
Friday morning.
Wow.
So but that's not necessarily the team's fault. It's just they have good people, and and I was always made very welcome in that team, either 83 or 85. I mean, Johnny Mack, when I first drove for him, was quite an intimidating character. But I think that little bit of that was show. But he, I'd have a lot of time for everybody in that team, because that is the thing in Formula One. There's a lot of people work equally as hard in middling teams or poor teams as they do in good teams. Yeah.
That's how it is. But it is one of my favourite looking F1 cars ever. It's a brilliant looking machine, isn't it? It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's a pretty car. And actually, there are a lot of design elements that Gustav had in that car. Like I think the brake ducts and things like that were, everybody ended up using those brake ducts. The cockpit was incredibly small. The roll bar was, well, I wouldn't have wanted to roll over in it, and I'm not, you know.
Sure.
But it was, yeah. I mean, I just fitted in it, and I'm 5'7" and a bit maybe. So it was a small, tight car, but yeah, it was really nicely designed, lots of detail, and had a lot to be proud of. But unfortunately, they just didn't have the budget to, you know. And Brian Hart did an amazing job with the engines, but he certainly couldn't service more than one team.
No, sure. It's just like the circumstance of the team, isn't it? So obviously you've walked away from F1 for the reasons you've said, you know, you'd get paid and things like that. But you mentioned that around that time you were out in F3000 in Japan at the time, and you'd also sort of been out and done some sports car racing out in Japan. You won the Japanese Group C and all that kind of a thing. But obviously, I guess a bit of a culture shock living in Japan. But you said it changed your career, and that switch to sports cars served you pretty well.
Yeah. I mean, I first went to Japan with Alan Docking in '81 after Mantle, and that was totally, and there weren't even signs in English in 1981. I went to Suzuka, did the Japanese Grand Prix, and Suzuka is a fantastic circuit now. The first lap out, there was no runoff areas. It was just banks, you know, all the way round, and there was very little guardrail. The track was the same, except, you know, the double corner before the bridge, that used to have a bank corner called Deckner, which was way better, one of the best corners on a circuit ever. Those chicane, so you went through the 130R, which, you know, in those days the bank was like, you know, meter off the circuit. So and then you came down flat all the way through to the first corner. There was no chicane. In fact, that got put in because in 1982 in the Japanese Grand Prix, when I went there with Rolt, Johnny Chikotto had a massive shunt, and I think maybe a Japanese driver broke his leg or something like that. So they put the chicane in after that. But it was just great, and of course you went to Japanese Grand Prix, and you know, you actually felt that you were that you were a bit of a star, you know. Obviously,
yeah.
You know, the Japanese were I mean, like I was very fortunate. I drove with Kunimitsu Takahashi. You know, in '81, he was, you know, we both drove for Adfan. He was in a different team, but he was like just an amazing person, and he ended up running. Jensen Button drove for him 3-4 years ago, but Kunimitsu was actually the first Japanese motorbike rider to win a Grand Prix. He was just the nicest guy. We won the Japanese Group C championship. In '87, I'd raced in '86 only in sports cars in Japan. Couldn't get anything else, and then they brought me to Japan. They gave me a Formula 3000 drive, but it was mainly to be co-driver to Kunimitsu in the Group C, and we won the championship. And he just the nicest man. And even in '85, when I was there doing Formula 2, he was my teammate. So we used to drive Japan from, you were testing here and racing there. We just talk, you know, listening to him talk about, like, because he knew Ralph Bryans, he knew Mike Heelwood, Tom Phillis. My parents, you know, they came to Japan once. My father, Kunimitsu, he wouldn't have been the best at English, but I chatted for like an hour just talking about the bikes and things like that, and races and things like that. I mean, he was an unbelievable hero. He had the best autograph I've ever seen anybody, where he would actually do a little drawing of himself, a little cartoon, and then sign. I mean, I just do a scribble. I can't even write now because my hands shake too much with old age and that. But he was just a really good man. He was 15. We won the Group C championship. I'll tell you, he was seriously bloody quick. And you know, like we won 2 races that year, and I think we were podium more or less every race. So he was great. So again, going to Japan, I was being paid money in '85. and it was really good. I won one race, probably a couple of podiums, but Roberto Moreno came out. He was my teammate towards the end of the year. I think maybe the last race he did better than me, but that was about it. But we were pretty equal. But it was nice people. AL was I'd been there the year before with Stefan, and I actually had replaced Stefan because he went to Formula One. Jeff Lees was there, but Jeff didn't stay with us. We all stayed in a hotel in Tokyo, which was really good. And Tiffany Dell and James Weaver used to come over and do sports cars. So it all kind of, it ended up being that was probably the friendliest period of racing, because if you raced, you all went back to the hotel. If somebody had a win, or you'd all go out and you'd just enjoy it. And we enjoyed each other's company. And yeah, definitely real friendships. The racing was good. You drove just everything. I mean, there was one year I remember I was in a racing car over 100 days in a year. Just testing or driving or racing, or as I say, if they paid you, then you did it. And it was, it absolutely made my life. So I'm got a lot of fondness for Japan, because my career was absolutely finished at the end of '84. And then obviously I got invited there. So very fortunate.
Yeah, you can see in your face it's a very fond sort of memory for you. It's obviously time for you.
Really long way to go. I mean, initially when you went, you had to fly via Anchorage in Alaska.
Oh, right. That way, yeah.
You were from Moscow. You weren't allowed to fly over Russia.
Wow.
So there you go. A bit like now, really. What goes around comes around.
Well, yeah, for sure. Excuse me, ATI. So you got into the sports cars. You've had success in Japan. I was want to fast forward a bit, really. Was it 89, 3 or 4 years later? I was aware of the time. But we move forward to the Sauber and the Mercedes setup. I mean, what a setup that was. I mean, you've gone in there full time alongside you had like Jochen Mass and Mauro Baldi, obviously two terrific drivers who have again raced many things. How did that move come about? Because that was a heck of a step, wasn't it, to how they were doing things?
It was. It really started in '88, and Mike Thackball had kind of given up, and so Sauber were going to Le Mans, and I think Mike had said they should talk to me. So Max Felter rang me about doing Le Mans in '88 in the AEG car.
Yeah.
And I'd been there in '85 with John Fitzpatrick, and I swore I'd never go back because it was just scary. I did 3 laps and I couldn't even go flat in the straight.
I read somewhere you thought, and the other drivers as well, that it was undrivable.
It was awful. And Sless actually was my teammate, Jean-Louis Sless, and he did 1 lap, came in and said, "Don't drive this car, it's shit." So they worked on it. Dudley Wood, who was the 3rd driver, and bless him, he went out on the 2nd day because they thought, well, you've done your 3 laps. Sless is friends, so let him start. So we better get Dudley a few laps. And he destroyed it. He destroyed it in the 1st lap. Broke his leg. And so anyway, and I said, well, I'm never going back. So anyway, Max was...
So that just put you off and on.
Max called me, and I was in Japan, and Aya was there, and you did talk about, well, what do you ask, and this, that, and the other. So I kind of knew what the going rate for Le Mans was, so I asked for more than that, thinking, well, I might as well keep everybody's. So we had twos and fro's, and eventually, I didn't budge, and Max said, yeah, okay, we'll pay you, to come to Le Mans. I said, okay, I'll think about it. And I went next door. We were racing at Suzuka, and I went next door to A, and I said, God, they're going to pay the money. And I said, I'm not bloody doing that. And he said, well, if you don't go and race for a Mercedes, he says, then you might as well not bother getting in a car. So it was good. It was good advice. And I went and I did Le Mans, arrived there. I think Klaus Nietzwitz was to drive with me, but he arrived after me. I actually got delayed coming from Japan. I was doing touring cars. And I remember I turned up in the paddock. Am I talking too much?
No.
I turned up in the paddock, and I went up to the. I mean, it's not like now. And I went up the truck and I said, "Is Max Welty around?" They said, "Well, yeah. Who are you?" And I said, "Well, I'm your driver." So anyway, getting fitted in the car, and it all seemed very nice. And Max said to me, he says, "So what's your best result at Le Mans?" And I said, "I've never done Le Mans." And honestly, you could see Max thinking, "I've just paid top dollar for this."
Really?
So, and so Naismith was going to start because they had James, Jochen, and maybe even Sless or Maro were in the other car. One of them refused to do it because Le Mans then was still dangerous. I mean, Joe, bless him, had only been killed a couple of years before.
Yeah.
And Klaus didn't turn up, so they put me in the car. And off I trundled, went round, did my 2-3 laps, came back. And you can tell when you're doing well, because people, you can see it. There was a bit of a buzz. And I said, "Well, how's the car?" I said, "Well, it seems fine." I said, "I'm just trying to find a way around the track." I said, "But you're third fastest." I said, "Yeah, but I haven't really, but everybody goes out in Le Mans, like nobody's going fast." So I did another 3-4 laps and I was still, pretty quick. So then Naismith got in the car and the tire blew, so we didn't race. But they obviously thought, "Hey, this guy's good."
And there was something there. Yeah.
So then in Fuji that year, it was between Slesser and Brundle for the World Championship. Stefan had been at one spa with Maro, Stefan Johansson. Stefan couldn't do it because he was driving for Formula One, or he was driving for a Toyota in Japan at the same time. So they had Philippe Streiff drive for them.
Oh yeah.
But to make sure that Sless had his best chance, they thought, well, if they had another driver, they could put Sless in the third driver in what the best car is. So Max called me and said, "Will I be available?" And coincidentally, this is, I've been driving for Vern Shippen. Vern had bought one of the Le Mans Porsches that year, one of the Shell cars. So it was like really good.
Yeah.
And Price Cook was my teammate, and Porsche knew Price in America, or I suppose I was the main driver for Vern in Japan.
Right.
So Vern had the conversation, I believe, to Porsche and they said they wanted Ludwig to drive the car. So they said, and Vern said, "Well, okay, I'll put Price," because Vern had 2 or 3 cars. And they said, no, we want Price. And Vern said, and they said, "But we don't know who he is. And we don't, so they more or less said, don't want them, this, which is understandable. I was in Japan, and I suppose they knew Price, who was incredibly, he won IMSA and that in America. Yeah. So you can understand that, but obviously I was pissed off. So at the time, Vern was running a Taka Fuji car there. So he said, "Well, you just try that," which was okay. And then Max called me and said, "Would I act as third driver?" So I rang for him and said, "Could I do that instead?" And he was really good and said, "Yeah, okay." So I did that. And so I was kind of there, standby. Typical Fuji, it was raining. The 4 other guys are doing the laps. I got in the car, last, go out, do like 3 laps, quickest. So, so obviously they think, Jesus, this guy's really good. But it wasn't. It was because I knew the circuit, I knew where to drive, I knew where I was reasonably good, but it wasn't that good, obviously. So they kind of were really pleased with me. And Jochen Maas was incredibly helpful and friendly and spent time with me, and just the nicest person one of the nicest people you'll ever meet in racing. And I didn't know Jochen at all before that weekend, and he was just great. And I remember then on the Saturday night, we had a team meeting, which I never had. And they sort of said, doing strategy for the next day. So they're sort of going to have Maro start one car. And then they said, and Kenny, you start the other car. And I said, "Are you joking?" And I remember Naismith said, "No." I said, "Listen," I said, "I've done like 6 laps in the car. You're trying to win a world championship, and you're going to give it to me to do your start in your car." I said, I'll do it, but I don't think it's the best decision. So then they kind of changed that, and I think Jochen started one car. But I ended up driving both cars, and I think I led the race in both cars, maybe, and then Maro's car broke, and then the other car had a problem or something like that. So again, you know, I looked good, but the car was good, so I looked good. I knew the circuit, and it wasn't difficult to lead a race in that car. I mean, the car, you know, the Michelin tires there were certain tricky bits to driving it, but it wasn't that difficult. You know, it was a good car. So obviously, then I think they were struggling for a driver, fourth driver, and because I suppose Maro and Celeste and Jochen always would have looked at me as being, well, I'm not really going to be a threat, but I'm going to be quick enough and I'm going to be a team player, which I always was. So, yeah, I got asked to go, and that was just great. The timing was good. I just got married, so it meant I could come back from Japan, live in Europe, and I suppose that glory that I'd given up on, I ended up getting that in '89.
Yeah, and obviously that performance
You
and
know,
everything had opened the door for it. And
so the circumstance of me getting that drive is like, you know, first of all, I was lucky to do Le Mans. I was lucky to look good at Le Mans. I was lucky that then I had the opportunity that I could do the bit in Fuji, and I was lucky that I looked okay there. So, yeah, I got a lot of luck to get that drive.
but you make your own luck, and you know, there's, you know,
I mean, I obviously I performed reasonably well.
yeah, yeah.
You know, so yeah, it was okay. It was okay.
Excellent.
But I definitely don't. I definitely think the perception of me was a bit different to what they actually the reality.
Well, who knows? Who knows?
But
It's all good. It's good. No, brilliant. I mean, just very quickly, I've just seen a comment here from Thomas Parker saying, "Is that a backdrop behind Kenny?" No, Thomas, that isn't. That is Kenny's actual workshop behind him. So yeah, there you go. They are actually, those cars are right behind him. We did touch that. I know you missed the start, Thomas, but yeah, isn't it cool? Right. So 89. This is the thing. Something that I've wanted to ask to either you or tomorrow or to whoever it was. The C988, that car, it's one of like my favorite sports cars ever, the silver. It's just, yeah. I've always wondered, because it was so simple to look at. The lines were so clean. It was silver. It just looked absolutely brilliant. Please tell me it was as good to drive as it was to look at.
it was a brilliant car to drive. I mean, the Michelin tires weren't great, so actually after about 4 or 5 laps, the rear tires would go off, and if you know you got a little bit sideways, you would spin. But other than that, the car itself was great. The team was great. But you know, like I was talking earlier about Red Bulls. You know, obviously they have a great culture in that team, and it's like any great team, whether it's football, whether it's your own business, whether it's even a government. Anything at all, if you're going to be successful, you have to have a great culture. And the culture in that team was, you know, most of the mechanics were Swiss who'd grown up in Switzerland. That is not really the center of motorsport. Peter Sauber, such a quiet man. I mean, maybe I spoke 4 or 5 times to him the whole year. You know, it wasn't that he was rude, it's just he was quite a shy man. And although I talk quite a bit, I am actually quite shy myself. But it was just a lovely team. The Mercedes engineers, this was really their first official step into motorsport. They were brilliant, absolutely lovely people. Yeah, by far and away the nicest team I ever drove for. Far and away. And it was just the culture, the way you treated you. Teammates were great, got on really well with Maro. You know, Jochen was always, just like almost like a father figure. Celeste was always Celeste, but you know, really good guy. The car was fantastic, and you know, the first race of the year again was Suzuka, which was the first time that Mercedes had raced in silver colors since 1950.
The heyday, yeah.
And it was a big deal because I remember them saying, you know, like, oh, we have to finish first and second, because every time Mercedes had come back into motorsport and run silver colours, they always finished first and second.
No pressure.
Well, you know, you kind of think, well, we would probably be okay to do that. And actually, we'd done a 24-hour test at Paul Ricard where Jochen had meningitis, so he couldn't do it. Mauro broke his leg at Daytona, so he couldn't do it. Slesser had Cudini and Slovak were going to drive for Slesser at Le Mans. So they turned up. Manuel Reuter turned up. So there was 5 of us. We had 2 cars. The 3 French guys decided they wouldn't drive at night. So I think between the 2 cars, I drove 17 hours and 24 hours. Oh. So I knew the car. It was okay. So went to Suzuka. Jochen then Saturday was rained off. Sunday we had qualifying. Jochen drove the car for a lap or 2, realized he couldn't drive because he still had meningitis. So that meant that they moved Slesser into my car, which Mauro qualified in pole, and I had to use Jochen's time because he was in effect my co-driver. So I think I started like 35th or something. And I started there, and obviously Suzuka was really physical, and those cars didn't have power steering. But again, I knew the circuit, and I remember Willie Dungle was our fitness guy.
Yeah, and he was the guy who looked after Loudon.
I mean, at school I was fit, but I'd never done any fitness in my life until I went to Mercedes. I went to Austria and had to do this workshop, and I remember Willie asking me, he says, so what training? I said, I don't do any. And he, you know, and he kind of did all these things. And he said to me that morning when he found out I was going to do the race on my own, he says, this is the race everybody will remember you for. And I said, no, I says, there's no way I'm even going to finish the race. It's, you know, it's 3 hours around Suzuka. He says, no. He says, honestly, he says, whenever you came to my camp, he says, I couldn't understand why Mercedes assigned a 30-year-old driver with a 50-year-old body.
Wow.
He said, but then we went to Fuerteventura training camp, and he said, but then when we went to Fuerteventura, he says, I realized you just say these things, but he said, because actually in Fuerteventura, only one driver, and that was Kurt Tim, who did their Group A. And Kurt was like proper fit, and he said there was only one driver fitter than you. So, you know, I was okay. So I did and Willie, he said, and I remember he came out and stood with the car with the umbrella, and he was just, every pit stop I stopped, he'd give me a drink. And he was just, yeah, he got in my head, and he said, everybody remember this race. And actually I drove and did all 3 stints, and halfway through the 3rd stint overtook Slesser and was leading. And I kind of remember thinking, yeah, they'll tell me to let him win, but you know, I have to pretend, you know, that I want to win. So I passed them and led for a couple of laps, and then I got the call to say, can you let Slesser pass again? Which honestly, I didn't have a problem with. I absolutely didn't, because Mauro was I was Mauro's teammate. It was his car. And it would have been wrong for me to have more points than him.
Sure.
So I didn't have a problem. But obviously, you know, I kind of came around, lifted off in front of the pit so that everybody saw that I let Slesser.
You've done it, yeah.
So it made me look again, you know, one of those circumstances. I knew Suzuka so well, and I knew, I guess I knew where the physical side of it was. And the car was just really good. The car was really good. You know, like, to be honest with you, yeah, whenever you have a good car, it's not difficult to win. Unless you have teammates in the same car, in which case it becomes more difficult.
Well, because yeah. But that's so good that you found the car so good to drive. I'm so glad.
No, it's a great car, really so good. And you know, the engine, everything like that. Just, I mean, I did Le Mans that year, and we were running 1st and 2nd, and I think there's only about half a lap between us, with an hour and a half to go or something like that. And I remember Dave Price, bless him, he passed away recently. He was running our car, and Maro. We were leading in the morning, and Maro did this amazing stint, and then on his in lap, I was standing there, and he didn't come in. And what it was, he went off at the first, this Dunlop chicane.
Yeah.
And everybody said, "Oh, it was all, his brakes went." And he said, and he had put in like a stint that was like just, I remember thinking we're going to win this race because like we're a lap up on everybody.
Yeah.
We're with this one. And anyway, so I drove my stint, and then we were talking later, and I said, "What happened?" And he says, "Kenny, I forgot the chicane was there. The chicane had been there since 1986.
Been there for 4 years, for 5 years.
It was his in lap, and he just forgot the chicane was there. So he's fun off. But I think that's the only mistake he made. And actually, you have to laugh at it, and it wouldn't have made any difference because later on, as I was saying, with about an hour and a half to go, we were catching Jochen's car slightly, and we were being told not to race. But Dave Price was saying, "We can still get this. We can, and he said just flat out." So I got in the car, first lap past the pits, went to get change gear, nothing, no gear, and I fell to fifth. So I drove all the way back, came into the pits. I think we had 2-3 laps ahead of the Porsche of Stuck and Wallach, and they said they couldn't fix it. So this car is geared to do 240 miles an hour in the straight, and I'm stuck in fifth gear. So I had to get out of the pits. So I did. You start and you stop, obviously, because the engine's got. But eventually, and they would put you back and you start again. And then after 2-3 times, I just stopped letting them pull me, and I just kept hitting the starter motor every time. So I built a little bit, and I slipped the clutch, and I got out. And so that's how good the engine was. That you could get out when it's geared for 240 miles an hour. You could get out the pit road. Admittedly, the clutch took about half a lap before I could actually exit, but it came back, and then obviously I couldn't stop again. So in those days, we did have radios, but they weren't great. And I asked them, "Okay, what lap time can I do to do the fuel?" And fortunately, they had computers that they could work that out. And then, we did a lap or two of that. And then I said, "Okay, what lap time do I have to do to stay second?" So they said, "Okay, you need to do, we've been doing 324s," and he said 410s or something. So I started to do that.
So you could ease back and
no, but that like trying to balance the fuel, and it wasn't, you're going around corners in fifth gear that you should be going around in second. It's, but the car was great, and I'd never done Le Mans, so that was the last year of the big long straight.
Yeah, the Mulsanne, yeah.
You had the old pits that stank of pee. Like we just had 2 caravans, a caravan for our car, like where the driver slept, so there were 2 double beds. But the problem I had is that Maro had his wife and Brancatelli had a girlfriend. So actually, every time I came back to lie in bed, there was a wife or a girlfriend, so I had to go and lie. I think I lost like 6 kilos or something in that race. I was so tired. Yeah.
Wow, I'm not surprised.
But it was just unbelievable. And I think that's still the biggest crowd ever went for them, because the year before Jaguar had won. So.
Oh sure, yeah.
Yeah. Which was
wow.
was great whenever you kind of you're being presented, and they're doing all the dam busters and all the connotations about the war, and of course you're on the German side. But it was probably just unbelievable 24 hours. The experiences you have in that were just fantastic. So, but again, the team, absolute pleasure to work with, and yeah, as I say, it's kind of the thing that they give me a little bit of glory to look back on. Otherwise, yeah. It's very good.
And it's just, and you've got the podium at Le Mans on your first race, and pretty cool thing to have. I mean, and especially given the issues.
And it's the old podium. It's the old podium, like, you know, it kind of was just above the garages that, you know, which.
Yeah, the proper one.
Yeah. So I mean, I did have a picture where I can make me out, but nobody else says no, it's me. So
it's brilliant.
Okay.
Love it. Love that. Excuse me.
No problem.
Apologies, my nose is starting running. Excuse me. Right, so yeah, fantastic car and great experience at Le Mans. Quick one, 1990, you switched to Nissan, and I'm loath to bring this up. I mean, you kind of had, I think I've got here, you took third at Spa and then fifth in was it in Canada and Donington and where are we? Mexico. So I mean, it was a decent year. That it kind of got better through the year, but that year, now I spoke to Martin Donnelly, as I said, and he sort of touched upon what happened at Le Mans. With what happened, because it was.
Well, obviously, okay. Didn't lose him. I mean, I got sacked at Mercedes for Michael, Carl Wendlinger, and Heinz Harald, for instance. Which right. I remember at the time, people said, oh, well, that's not fair. But, you know, I kind of understood it. You know, because like I wasn't on that trajectory of going for glory, you know?
Yeah, they were the young.
I did understand it, and I knew how good those three drivers were.
Yeah.
And I think that, you know, it was kind of that time where actually, you know, because Andy Walsh proved it the year before when he won Le Mans for Jaguar straight out of Formula 3 car, more or less. So there was this whole thing that actually we were all trying to sell ourselves as you need experience in a sports car to be good and look after the car and all that. And there was an argument for that because they were quite delicate to get 6 hours or 1,000 kilometers. You did need to be careful, but that had changed because everything had become reliable and a lot of it become about being quick. So I did get that, and obviously the only thing that I felt was unfair is that they probably could have told me a couple of months earlier. I didn't find out until just before Mexico. And in the summer, I'd had another team ask me if I would be available. I said, well, no. You know, because actually I was pretty sure that I was wrongly to be sure, but I thought I would probably stay where I was. And why would you want to move when you're winning? So that's the only thing that I kind of feel, you know, if they thought that, maybe they should have had a word with me. Because actually the person who told me that I should start looking was Jochen. Because, you know, he had a meeting with them, I think at Spa, and said, you know, how would he feel about this? And he said, well, who's not going to be here? And they said, well, Slesser, we can't sack him, we can't sack Baldy, so we'll have to again. So he, you know, but they kind of were like, it isn't definite, but actually he said to me, he said, just so you know, and he didn't have to do that. It's very good, but obviously I found out a couple of weeks later anyway. But so I went to Nissan again. Dave Price had gone there, who is probably the nicest person in motorsport ever, Dave Price. So many, he affected so many drivers, people, businesses, just such a really good guy, competitive, clever, can't speak highly enough of the man. It's really, so he took me there. But they had people who were there, who Julian had been there and Mark had been there, and I think Martin drove from the year before even. So there was almost like, well, Dave Price was coming in with his people, and there's other people here, and then Japan had a say, and it was just very, very political, and I wouldn't say everybody was pulling in the same direction. You know, I was kind of doing okay to get the drive, and then Dave Price called me. He says, I've got a contract. He says, and I think you need to sign it. I said, okay. He says, it's not what but we've been talking about, he says, but if that's all I can offer you, because, and Eddie Jordan, who was my manager, supposedly, though other than the initial introduction, he was trying to get somebody else to drive.
Right.
And they cut me. And Pricey said, he says, sign this. He said, because, so anyway, I ended up going there and probably less money than I should have, but at least I had to drive. So went there. Raul was supposed to go drive with us. Raul was there.
Oh yeah, I spoke with him recently.
Yeah.
Nice.
Raul was going to drive for me.
I didn't realize.
And he even tested at Monza, and he was really quick because obviously he won an 88. Then he got an IndyCar drive, I think, with Dick Simon, so he didn't do that.
Yeah, they had the Duracell deal. Yeah.
And so we ended up doing that, but it was just I drove with Julian Bailey, who's a good driver, but Julian would just go out in the first stint and use up all the fuel. And I said, well, what the hell is it? He says, it's not my problem. He says, I just have to be quicker than you. I said, but that's not how it works.
In a team,
Julian, bless him, was out of the car, really good teammate and all that. And actually very honest, because he told me that. He said,
yeah.
But I just said, well, I don't bloody need this. So I ended up driving with Brancatelli, which Franco probably wasn't as competitive. I'm not sure. Yeah, maybe it was with Julian and I finished third at Spa. Yeah, and then Le Mans, I had Martin and Grullo, which was okay, really good. Like both of them got on well with them. They were current Formula One drivers, flew in from Canada. Neither of them had an ego. Couldn't think highly enough. They listened to me. Said, "Well, no, you just go, you do." So but the car was just at Le Mans that year. It was, just everything just didn't work. My car kept breaking, and actually, I know Mark did the really great lap time and pole position, and at about 10 minutes to midnight on the second day, they've sent me out in the car because I hadn't even done it quick time, and then obviously fixed the wastegate, and I must have passed like 15 or 20 cars, and I still qualified fifth. So like Mark's lap time was quick, but actually I can see, it was doable. It's easy to say to do it because I was like 5-6 seconds slower, but I probably knew that I lost 4 seconds overtaking traffic.
Right.
So Mark probably would have been a bit braver than an old man like me at that time. So the car was good, but I remember I was having with my engineer, and he says, "Oh well, it's usually when it's a shit rehearsal, it's a good performance." I said, "No, when it's a shit rehearsal, it's usually a shit." I was not happy. So anyway, went off, warm-up lap or parade lap, went to the, going slow into the Dunlop. Pressed the brake pedal, there were no brakes. I had no brakes in the car. So they said, okay, get the car. So if you look at the footage in 1990 on the parade lap, you have the first 4 cars, and then you have like a 300-meter gap to me because I couldn't brake. And then just coming back to the Porsche cars, and I hadn't used the gearbox to slow down, and the gearbox broke. So 2 things break before I even got. So it was like, so it was a bit of a disaster, and that. But Donington actually were really good 5th there, I think. Which because I was really disciplined around the fuel. In Canada, I actually think I should have been 2nd because there was pace cars. I was on the fuel. I was running 5th, and everybody else was over bar. I think the Mercedes. I think there was 1 Mercedes, and I was absolutely. And I remember talking to Pricey on the radio, and he was saying about, and I Branko getting it, and I says no. I says I'm driving the whole race. Because I was like, and then I overtook Jesus Pereira. And just as I overtook him, I went over the manhole cover, which lifted the manhole cover and went through his screen. And they red flagged the race. So I ended up fifth, but I actually think I should have been second.
Yeah.
Because I had the fuel numbers, whereas, which was at Donington. I think Julian was like the course a lap ahead of me, and he ran out of fuel, and I actually overtook him, and he ran out of fuel. So I was very disciplined, and then it was part of the racing,
Yeah.
So there were some good things and some bad things, but they obviously folded at the end of that year, and that was
And that was
the end of full-time motor racing.
Yeah, unfortunately, which is a shame, of course. Excuse
No,
me.
hey, it was okay, and the team probably needed 2 or 3 years to grow under Dave Price's management or whatever, but unfortunately, at that time, Japanese motorsport, I don't think had patience. They wanted instant success, and that was it.
Yeah, sure. It's so it needs to happen now type thing.
Obviously, Toyota learned that later on, probably through the rally team in Germany. So they were told they knew they had success, so they trusted the process. Whereas I think everything was like, oh no, we should be able to do this instantly, and it's not that easy.
No, absolutely not. The question came in actually sort of ties in quite nicely. Kay Baker, she says, how did you find driving for Tom Walkinshaw in the Jaguar? I mean, obviously the Jaguar, and hell of a car. Another one of those cars that everyone looks back at and thinks what a brilliant car it looked like.
Well, unfortunately, when I drove it in 91.
91.
Yeah. It was probably past its best because I think they did it the 7.4 liter and the engine 4. So the engine got heavier. It moved the regulations up to 1,000 kilograms. So it was too heavy. I mean, again, I drove Tom had actually offered me an 89, but I went to Mercedes. Because that's where I felt it was a better car, and also they offered me more money, which at that time of my career was important. But for 91, for Le Mans, Mercedes wanted me to do Le Mans.
Right.
Were really keen for me to do Le Mans, which was nice because, but what they offered me for one race, I was getting a lot more from Tom to do Daytona, Sebring, and Le Mans. So although I knew the Mercedes should win Le Mans, I'm married, I have a young family, I'm still earning a living racing, but this might be the last year. So I ended up driving for them. Daytona, I think, was it Scott Pruitt wrote one car off, so I didn't get to race in Daytona.
I remember, Scott, again, I spoke with Scott just before Christmas, and
And then went to Sebring, and John Nielsen wrote a car off, so I didn't race there either. So went to Le Mans, and I drove with Bob Wallach, who I'd driven IMSA with a couple of years before. Again, really nice guy. I drove with Bob in 1990 for Jockendar IMSA Porsche at West Palm Beach. And I'd raced against Bob for a year in World Sports Cars and stood on podiums. And I think the most he ever did was that to me. Nothing. There was and Bob Wallach was like one of those scary people, you kind of think, okay, you don't want to speak to Bob because he probably thinks you're an asshole.
Sure.
But Maro said, when I was going to drive, Maro said, no, he's a really nice guy. And actually, Raul said, no, he's a really good guy. So I flew to Miami, and Bob sat in the seat in front of me in the plane, and went down, got the bags. We never spoke in the plane. Got the bags, and I'm standing there, and he says, I guess you're coming with me then. I said, yeah, that's good. So off we go, get the hire car, and we drove to West Palm Beach, and we never stopped talking. And actually, it was really interesting because obviously I followed his career when he was doing Formula 2 with Rondell, and he'd driven Porsches with Stefan and Boutsen and that there, and like against Patrese and Alboreto and Lancias, and you're just talking about drivers and perceptions and all this. And he was just really, really good, interesting. I think I'm pretty sure that he liked me, because actually I wasn't there to try and
So like one up.
yeah, I'm not trying to outdo you. And I remember he was driving Porsches all the time and come to qualify in West Palm Beach. He says, "So do you want to do it?" I says, "No." I says, "I'm happy you did. You're probably you're more used to it now." He says, "Well," he says, "well, we're going to qualify." He says, "The two of us will end up in the same. Either of us will drive. We'll end up in the same position." I says, "It's okay, you drive." So we got on really well, and then the following year, we drove Jaguar, and again, really good to drive with. Drove with Theo, who really talented, quiet guy, no ego, nice people. And
that was the thing about Teo Faber, even in F1, wasn't he? He just did his thing, quiet.
Really nice guy, really nice guy. And Corrado was really good too. Corrado was seriously a good driver. But it was interesting. Everybody looks. That was the year that the Mazda won Le Mans.
It's surprising. Yeah, they found the loophole with the rotary engine and stuff, didn't they? And all
they were 100 or 150 kilos lighter.
Yeah, the lighter car with the engine and
Who on earth agreed that? Because before Mazda were nowhere.
Yeah.
That year they came. Mercedes should have won it because they were miles quicker.
Yeah.
But actually, if Mazda had to run the same regulations that everybody else had to, i.e., 1,000 kilos, Jaguar would have finished first, second, and third. And that car was past the sell-by date. Okay, 24-hour race is great if you are trying to win it. Absolutely, you're tired, but there's just a real buzzing.
There's that carrot at the end. Yeah.
That race, I finished third, and it was just hard. It was just boring because I think even with 4 hours to go, we were running 7th or 8th, and then some cars broke down. We ended up third. The car wasn't quick enough, so you're just going around, you're doing things. But it was nice. TWR was again a really good organization. Tom, I got on okay with Tom. I didn't have a lot to say. Tom wouldn't have stopped and had a big chat or anything like that there. But I think, I was okay. Never had to invoke any contracts and say I wasn't quick enough or anything like that. But I only broke from a couple of times. Yeah, but he always paid me. I got paid for the races that I didn't do. So, in fact, I quite a good record because I did Le Mans in 85 and 90, didn't start, got paid. 88, didn't start, got paid. Daytona, 91, didn't start, got paid. Sebring. So, I was okay.
So, you can't complain.
No.
You got the
but
money.
A lot of people were trying not to pay you. So, he was okay. And, nice thing to do. I mean, it's obviously nice to stand on the podium, but I wouldn't say it was the most exciting race of my life. It was kind of a lucky third.
Sure, sure. It's like Mazda, as you say, they just sort of came out.
Yeah, I mean, but in fairness to Mazda, the guys who drove it, I mean, obviously Johnny and Gasho were the two Formula One people, and in England, Johnny gets a huge credit for that, which he totally deserves. But the guy who was the absolute star in that car was Volker.
Volker Weidler, yeah.
And obviously, I was racing in Japan a little bit, so I got to know Volker a bit. And he was quite Germanic, but a really nice guy, good driver. But in one of the double stints he did during the night, he forgot to put his earplugs in. And that's why I think later that summer, and I was over in Japan, and we were out to dinner, and he said, I haven't slept since Le Mans. And he got up from the restaurant, went home, and he never went back, never raced. And he had, is it tinnitus in his ears?
The whistling, yeah.
So because he forgot to put his earplugs in, and he had to give up his race. And actually, the person who replaced him in Formula 3000 in Japan was Heinz Halfens.
Okay.
Because Volker was driving for the team that I drove for in 85 and with Kunimitsu in 87. And I remember Moto Moriwaki had a talk to me in August and asked me what I thought of Harold, and I said, no, he's really good, and this, that, and the other. So yeah, and that's obviously got him back into it. He did, yeah. So he replaced Volker.
Wow, I didn't realise it was going to be steps.
Was it 90? It was either 91 or 92. I'm not quite sure which, but that's when Volker, and it was because he forgot to put his earplugs in for a double.
Wow. It's amazing that little error had.
It's understandable, to be honest. It's understandable because, like, the rotary in 91, and you had the Cosworth V8 that rated about 12,000 in 92.
Well, that would do it, wouldn't it? I mean, oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would definitely do it. Wow, I didn't realise that was the case, because I can remember seeing.
He was a really good driver. He was really good driver.
I just want to skip on a bit. What have we got here? Toyota 92 to 93. You came second at Le Mans. I mean, obviously we're focusing on Le Mans. That's what everyone keeps asking about.
I didn't do a lot in 92. I think I only did. I actually raced Daytona for Dan Gurney.
Yes, that was
with Banjo and Andy Wallace, which was obviously good. And then I did in the third Toyota at Le Mans. Was wet. Goodyear tires weren't great, but actually, I would say it was one of the best races I ever drove. I mean, there was one stint during the night when and there was like fog and rain, and yeah, I remember the lap times. I was like 20, 30 seconds quicker than anybody. And in fact, I came out of the pits to start my first stint. Theo went past in the other Toyota.
Yeah.
And you couldn't really see. So I remember going down to the first chicane in the spray, and I was thinking, that has to be Theo. And I overtook him and carried on. And I overtook him again later in the stint. So, I mean, I actually was one of those races that you just felt, no, I'm driving, because I actually, the test we had done at Ricard for Toyota, I actually didn't really do that well. Right. And I remember being a bit worried that they might drop me for a little. But fortunately they didn't. But then in the race, I think I did really well, and had a really good battle on the Sunday with Alio. He was only like about 15, 20 seconds behind me in the Peugeot. And the two of us drove flat out. And I remember afterwards, Philippe coming up and saying, because obviously the two of us were like, flat out. And, Toyota, with different fuel in those days, like a different, and they had decided from like midday on the Sunday, they could make it to the end if they went one grade higher fuel. I think we were like 2-3 seconds quicker just on the fuel, but I'm pretty sure we're doing the same. Those cars, honestly, that is the only car I realized when in the middle of the race, I actually realized I was smiling, because it was
that good.
Best car. The 93 car was slightly better, but obviously too many people got involved, because we should have won that race. So I think Japan got involved and redid the electronics, and Japan got involved and rebuilt the gearboxes, which were very delicate anyway. I think Tony Southgate wanted us to use the sequential gearbox. The Peugeot had used it before, but Toyota said no. So we still had the old H box.
Right.
Which the guys in Norfolk at Tom's had rebuilt, done a great job on. But then the Japanese said, no, we can improve it. And of course, the gearbox and electronics fell apart. But I do think we'd done 2 tests that year, and with all the stuff made in Europe and the UK, and we were faster than Peugeot. At every test we went to Le Mans, we were faster. Our reliability was decent. Fell apart at Le Mans, unfortunately. But again, I think that was the thing at the time. Japanese just felt, well, if you do this and it'll happen. Whereas actually,
it's not how it works.
You think how patient Toyota had to be to win, and now they win all the time. But that took years, But yeah, I mean, those cars, V10s. I mean, I think that year they had a sprint race at Silverstone, or a 500k race at Silverstone. And I think Jeff Leach would have qualified 10th for the Grand Prix. And then we did a 24-hour race in that car. Those cars were seriously fast. The same engines as the Formula One car. They were 750 kilos, but they had ground effects. It was just, yeah, they were like stuck to the road.
Gee,
and the thing is, you see all these cars, God, these go really quick. These are, you think, probably not quick enough to drive these. And then you get in them and you think, this is easy because this just sticks. But it is like,
wow.
Yeah, they were really, really fast cars. Really fast. And in fact, the problem was, with the gearbox, which is probably why everybody ended up going to flappy paddles. You could, the braking was so late, you couldn't, you had to go, you could only really for one, maybe two gear shifts. So you were jumping gears all the time because you didn't have the time.
Yeah, because everything's happening.
So late. But they were just unbelievable cars. And in fact, Eddie Irvine, who, obviously I know Eddie, and I met up with him in Miami a few years ago. I was over there and he was living there. Went out to dinner. I'm actually with Fiona and my wife. We were there in business, and we were talking about, and he said the best car he ever drove was the '93 Toyota. He says, because it was just, he says you had the right amount of roll. It wasn't, they were just unbelievably good cars.
That's some high praise.
I mean, I remember driving in '93 with a smile on my face and think, God, I can never remember smiling. It was just fantastic.
That's got to be the highest praise any driver can give to a car.
I know Tony Southgate, who designed that car. He actually did the Jaguar as well. And I saw him a couple of weeks ago, and I was saying to him, but still the best car, or the best car I drove was that. I mean, obviously, there's cars here that did more success and were lovely to drive, but that was like,
another level.
Just grip like, I can't believe,
that. Yeah.
Acceleration, braking, everything. It's
Brilliant.
Really
brilliant. Excuse me. Sorry, I'm not sure what's going on here. Just want to fast forward. I mean, to '96, what turned out to be your last race, Daytona with the Newcastle and all that kind of thing. Prior to the race, had you thought about sort of calling it a day, or had you...
No, I mean, I wanted to race in '93. I finished Toyota, and I said, but the drug was still there, so I wanted to race '94. I didn't do anything. '95, I ended up driving for Sard Toyota at Le Mans with Alan Fairty. Yeah. Now, Sard had finished second the year before, so you're thinking it should be okay. And they turned up with a Toyota MR2, and it was so bad. It was, I mean, Alan and I were just like, admittedly, we were really well paid. And again, I did have the chance to drive. Well, I'm pretty sure I would have ended up in a McLaren, but the money was about a third of what Toyota paid me. So I was obviously at that stage of my career where, I needed an income, because at that time I didn't know what I was going to do for the rest of my life. So I ended up driving there. But the car, I remember we went to test it, I think Nagara. And the car turned out, and it was just a road-going MR2 with the previous year's Toyota V8 turbo gearbox stuck in the back end. And it even had glass windscreens. It was like, they'd taken the windscreen winder off, but the window was there. It was glass. The car, I think, weighed 1,450 kilos.
Jeez.
It was awful. It was awful, and it was slow, and that's the only time I didn't sleep before a race, because I was just thinking, this is
madness.
Sold your soul here. Unfortunately, the car, Alan had a stopped after about a lap or two because the clutch was slipping, and then I was thinking, oh, okay, that's it. And then they spent about an hour to fix it. They sent them out. He did 4 or 5 more laps. Same thing. I was thinking, okay, they'll definitely give up now. I went the game. Same thing happened. So, and they kept fixing it. I said, you fixed it? And they said, yes, we can't give up. So eventually they sent me out. And I remember on the first lap going up the straight, the clutch started to slip. And I was so happy because obviously you have to sound disappointed. But I was so happy because the thing was just dangerous. It was dangerous. And, I mean, the team, the year before finished second, so they should have been able to do
something.
But they totally underestimated making a GT car from a Group C car.
Sure.
But anyway, hey ho. Yeah, that stage of my career where sometimes you end up doing things that you shouldn't have done. But at the time, there was logic to it because you were thinking, well, actually, they probably will be reasonably competitive, but they weren't even. They were awful. Absolutely.
Not even close. Yeah. So I mean, so unfortunately, your career ended with an accident at Daytona. I mean, I've seen the footage. Crikey, O'Reilly. It's a heck of a thing. I mean, just what actually sort of happened? It looked like it looked like the car.
The Mazda was the slowest car at Le Mans or at Daytona, which I was lapping. We'd lost time in the pits, so we were just like running. And the high cars always stayed at the top. And I remember seeing this Mazda, and I knew it was the slowest car. As it turned out, it was the slowest driver in the slowest car, and that was his first time out. And this was like 12 o'clock on the second day. As I ran up, I hardly even felt the thing touch. I knew it was close, but it should really just have been that. But whatever way it broke the half axle on the left rear, and the car just started to spin, which wasn't a big problem until it spun, and the side that was kind of made the car look like a sandwich, then behaved like a sandwich and dug into the sand and set it in motion and whatever. So it was, just the car, but walked away. And Lawrence Pierce, who, that's the only time I drove for Lawrence, and he was really very early on. And God, I felt so bad. But he was brilliant about it. He's the person who actually restored this car. He's the person who comes over, helps me with this car.
Wow.
So Lawrence, he's just really, really good, and I do not know why he's still friends with me because I destroyed a car for him. But the Newcastle people were great. They rebuilt the car. I went to Donington, tested it, and it was okay. I mean, I've lost the sight in the center of my right eye because of a chest injury from that accident.
Oh wow!
The way you see in cartoons and eyes. Well, basically, that's what this. I mean, I can see around it, and I can pass, reading or license and everything like that. So but it is there. It's like blind, and it goes black and white, and then it goes to color. So it's okay. Well, it's not okay. But I had that, and I tested, and I came back, and we just started the business and something like that. And I think mobile phones were maybe even. I'd spoken to Fiona a little bit that day, and then I came home. We were sitting talking about work and about things that weren't quite what I needed to do to get this new range launched. And she said, "Oh, how was the car?" And I said, "That was fine." I said, "You know what? I don't need this anymore." So that was it. I know it wasn't a conscious decision. It wasn't something I thought about driving home. It was just that I'm done.
Right.
Actually, so I just wish I'd made the decision 3 years before, but probably took 3 years for me to wise up that actually I don't need this anymore. Yeah. I mean, so
which is fair enough, and you've gone out on your terms for.
So actually, Newcastle already paid me for the season, so I was able to send them the money back, and so very well. I turned down some money in the end.
Wow.
Probably, yeah. So it was a nice thing to do, but overall, yeah, lots of nice memories and some successes and a lot of failures, but a lot of very good people. Learned a lot. Um, some really good cultures, and yeah, very good.
Just quite a ride, all told. It was, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I've been just go on. I'm looking. I've way gone over too much. I talk too much, so I'm
That's all right.
sorry if I've bored everybody.
Oh, but never a problem. No, never a problem. Love it. Love it. Just very, I mean, you talk about successes and stuff. Just want to touch very quickly on the business. I mean, that's been very, very successful. It's weird because I know the name Acheson and everything, but I never put two together. It wasn't until recently.
I don't think many people knew the name. We never made anything for ourselves. We only made for other people.
I mean, I kind of knew it just generally through history, and
Yeah.
and it wasn't through researching this that I thought.
You're in building trade, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, but my brother's business is Acheson and Glover, which
Well, you learn something new every day. I've worked with.
So that was my father's business, and my brother now runs that. So,
well, crikey.
Yeah. So
I didn't put two and two together there either. Clearly, maths isn't my strong point.
Yeah.
It's a good job I'm not a professional estimator.
No, we started the business in '92. I knew my wife was really talented at what she did. I didn't know what I was going to do at the end of racing. When I was in Japan, she used to come because she worked for a company that were big suppliers to Marks and Spencer's and beauty products and things like that. So she used to come and see me and then do a day's comparative shopping or 2 days. And so I kind of obviously saw what she was looking for. So occasionally I go back and say, well, I found this idea. And occasionally, so I kind of had a little bit of an interest in it, but I knew how good she was and everybody she worked with. Obviously, she went through, within 3-4 years, she was, really high up in the company she worked for. So I knew she was really super talented and all that. And whenever it came, she had this idea about there was a gap in the market. And I said, okay, well, we'll do it. So, and we couldn't manufacture, we didn't have much, and everybody thought, oh yeah, really good idea, don't do that. But we started, and it wasn't that we had a great idea, it was out of necessity, because my motor racing was come to an end. So we had to do something, and as a sports person, who's going to employ me? So I kind of, I suppose my family had, business, and I ran in Formula 3, I'd ran my racing team. So I kind of understood business to a degree. I understand about the culture of what's successful, and life is just about making decisions. And at the time, it was a lot easier to start a business. So we started, and Boots were the first people to give us an opportunity, and yeah, business just did very well on the back of Fiona's talent. But obviously, we employed a lot of really good people, talented. So yeah, I was really very, very fortunate that they ended up being very, very successful. Absolute pleasure to be able to employ, I think, 350, 400 people in the end. So it was, yeah, that was just a really nice thing to be able to do. And to do it so simply, like we kind of almost ran it like a corner shop, in that, we didn't have an accountant, we had people working accounts, and outside account, we didn't, so I think we had a really nice culture, because actually it wasn't accountants who made the decision. I was the accountant. And so basically, I understood what works is just like running a team, really, and it's trying to create that culture. And we just really very talented people, technical people, marketing people, people who, would make things. So yeah, really, really big part of my life, and, very, very fortunate to be able to have done.
Yeah, and it's great that it's obviously been so successful in supplying some big names in the high street, and yeah, fantastic.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
yeah.
Great.
We no longer own it. We sold it 4 years ago, so we've moved on.
No.
So yeah, man of leisure now.
Perfect. Perfect. Just when it comes to a couple of comments that have come in here at the end, a guy called Stuart Dent
Yeah.
tuned in. He said that you also smiled in the car the first time you had your F2 test in the Ralt Honda. He said he remembers it. So
Yeah.
apparently so. He had a smile.
Tell you what, that year changed the smile on my face anyway. That was a nice sounding engine though. The V6 Formula 2 car was a really nice sounding engine. But I wouldn't really have smiled much that year. It wasn't exactly.
He was maybe a smile at the start.
Well, the engine noise was nice, but yeah, but tough year.
Yeah, sure. And he's also said, he's also asked, were you ever told that you didn't sit properly in a racing car?
Yeah.
It feels like there's an inside joke there.
Yeah. I think Stuart was. He remembers more about these things than I do.
He knows. He's just asking that. Right. No, it's not. Right. We always end up on some fun questions. Always do the same, just the same questions, just some quick fire-ish ones that we always throw out there. Excuse me. Favorite car you've raced? I think you might have answered that before, but do you have a favorite?
Favorite car race is probably the Toyota, though my favorite car would be my Formula 3 March.
Yeah. I still can't believe I'm sitting looking at that. That's fantastic. Okay, cool. Favorite circuit you've ever raced at?
Favorite circuit, old Austria.
Oh, the proper one. Yeah. I think you're the first person.
Yeah. I did Formula 3 there in 79, 80. That was just fantastic. Really good.
Yeah, going around the back of the hill, that then I'll go in the front.
Yeah. That was a great circuit. Bumps, everything, just wonderful circuit.
Love that. Fantastic. Is there one series that you raced in that you didn't race in that you would have liked to have done?
I
Touring
would
cars.
have raced in America. I mean, in '84, I kind of had signed to do IndyCars in '85.
Yeah.
Yes, but then they decided then the year they didn't. Yeah, kind of found the strap and decided not to do it. So that all got pulled. So I would have liked to have done that, but equally, if I had, a lot of people limp. Unfortunately, yeah, it was brutal. Those cars were absolutely brutal, something like that. So again, things tend to happen for the right reasons. So I would like to race in America, whether in Indy cars or IMSA. IMSA was a really good series. I did a couple of races, but that was all. But yeah,
maybe a full-time one there. Okay, this is the last one, and it's the impossible question that I always ask. You've raced against raced with some amazing drivers. I'm just going to name just a few. I mean, there's some that we've mentioned already. We've got like Boutsen, Johansson, and the two Fabis and Thackwell, Guerrero, Alboreto, Paletti, Chicotto, Dana, Sura, Beloff, Palmer, Johansson, Streff. Who else have we got? Keke Rosberg racing against Derek Warwick, Nelson Piquet, Alan Jones, Brundle, Mass, Stuck, Jabal, Holbert, the Unzers, the Andrettis. I mean, Prost, Lauda, Mansell, Fittipaldi. I mean, crikey, you've raced against a lot of. I
would say I've raced against very few of them. I might have been in the same race.
You were in the same race, yeah.
Well, in the race.
Is there one that stands out as in your mind as being?
I suppose. I mean, yeah. I think those people are raced. I would say the three standout drivers that I would have been in a race with. Two, I would say I could class have been raced against is that Prost and Michael, because I did Prost in Formula 3.
Of course.
Michael in sports cars a little bit. And obviously I knew Ayrton I didn't. I mean, I did a couple of Grand Prix, but I remember in '81 when I had a broken leg at Donington, him racing Formula Ford, and the guy was really good, and so I would say in my time, my period, the three standout drivers were Prost, Senna, and Schumacher, and I don't know which order I would put them in because they were all unbelievably top,
Yeah.
absolute.
I think those three guys, they don't need to be in an order, do they? They're just up
Yeah.
there. And,
Yeah, I mean that's in my time. Obviously, you look at now, you would add in Lewis, and you would add in Verstappen, and previous to that, you would have your Clark, your Fangio, probably Jackie Stewart, who gets overlooked an awful lot.
Yeah.
And I think that's because of his personality. I think he kind of ended up, maybe he's not the person that fans really want to, but as a racing driver, he is incredibly good, at a very deadly time in the sport. And Fangio obviously was magnificent, and I did have the pleasure to meet him 2 or 3 times as well, and just such a nice gentleman.
That's lovely. That's amazing. And I think that's a good point about Jackie Stewart and the time that he raced, because it was just brutal, wasn't it? But,
yeah.
Fantastic. I love those three there that you think that.
Yeah.
It was brilliant.
They stand out over anybody else. And there's a really high bar there, but those three really top of the world, all three of them.
Ones that stand out. Fantastic. I mean, Kenny, it's been fantastic speaking with you. I mean, it's been 2.5 hours and it's flown. It's been absolutely brilliant. I always like it when we go longer because we talk about.
Well, I'd say everybody's probably gone to sleep by now. So
no, we've still got loads of people tuning in.
We can go find out the Liverpool-Chelsea result.
Well, I had it penned as a 0-0 because of the way it's been recently, but I've got no idea. We'll see. But no, thank you very much. I mean, it's been
my pleasure, and thanks for asking me on. Sorry, I've gone on too much about things.
No,
it's been nice to chat and offload, and hopefully I haven't.
I've always said there is no such thing as too long. When it comes to motorsport, we can always talk about so many things. And there's a couple of comments that have just come in. Kay Baker said, "Thank you for the great stories. Could listen all night." And Marion Speed.
I think
brilliant chat and memories. Right, chaps, you've got 4 hours to go. No, no, it's been brilliant. Thank you everyone for tuning in and for the questions and the comments. It's been brilliant. And again to you, Kenny, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for asking me, and thanks for everybody for listening. And those who've tuned out earlier, thanks to them too.
Brilliant. And another one.
Bye.
Great stuff. Thanks everyone, and we'll speak to you all very soon.
Thank you.
Good night.